Good morning, everyone. I would like to call to order this public hearing of the Committee on the Judiciary and Public Safety. The time is now 11:34 a.m. on Tuesday, February 27th, 2024. And we are conducting the hearing in person in room 500 of the John A. Wilson Building and via Zoom. We're also streaming live on Council Channel 13, on the DC Council's website, on YouTube at @CM Brooke Pinto, and on Twitter at @CM Brooke Pinto. I am Councilmember Brooke Pinto, representing Ward 2 and Chairwoman of the committee. The Committee on the Judiciary and Public Safety has oversight responsibility for matters affecting the district courts, criminal law, procedure and justice, public safety, including policing, violence prevention and intervention, and civilian police oversight, access to justice, victim services and justice grants, fire and emergency medical services, and the district's 911 and 311 services, forensic science, fatality review and medical examinations, Homeland Security and emergency response, corrections, family law, probate and estates, child support, and women's and gender policy. Today, the committee is meeting to conduct a performance oversight hearing of two agencies. First, the Criminal Code Reform Commission, and second, the Office of the Deputy Mayor for Public Safety and Justice. We'll first hear from the Criminal Code Reform Commission, also known as the CCRC. The commission was established as an independent agency for the purpose of providing recommendations to the council on comprehensively revising our criminal code. This work culminated in the Revised Criminal Code Act of 2022, which was the first comprehensive update recommended to the district's criminal code since it was enacted by Congress in 1901. Unfortunately, Congress disapproved the RCCA interfering with the district's criminal code update. The commission was originally planned as a temporary agency, but the council recently converted it to a permanent entity tasked with continuing to provide expertise and guidance on changes to criminal laws in the district. Then we will turn to the Office of the Deputy Mayor for Public Safety and Justice, or DMPSJ. The Deputy Mayor is responsible for providing direction, guidance, and support to, and coordination of, the district's public safety agencies to develop and lead interagency public safety initiatives to improve the quality of life in the district's neighborhoods. The Deputy Mayor provides oversight of a number of critical agencies, including the Metropolitan Police Department, the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement, the Department of Corrections, Fire and Emergency Management Services, and the Office of Unified Communications. The Deputy Mayor has an especially important role recently as we have been grappling with a significant spike in crime in our city. I'm very interested to hear from Deputy Mayor Pia today about our response to crime and how she's using her position and resources to develop comprehensive, evidence-based strategies to reduce crime in a way that is sustainable. Some of the things I plan to ask her about today include how we can make our violence interruption programs more accountable and efficient, how we're using the People of Promise list to guide our violence reduction efforts by focusing on the highest risk individuals, recent efforts focused on reducing youth crime, like the youth curfew and the 211 warm line, and how effective those interventions have been, and how the Deputy Mayor is coordinating with other agencies to address issues like truancy and provision of services to address the root causes of crime. I appreciate how hard the Deputy Mayor works every day to promote public safety and her team, and I look forward to hearing more from her about outcomes of our existing programs and ways that we can improve what we are currently doing to turn around the trends that are plaguing our communities. For today's hearing, we're going to follow our usual practice and hear from public witnesses first. Public witnesses have 3 minutes to present their testimony, and those who represent organizations will have 5 minutes. So I'd like to call our panel of in-person public witnesses for the Criminal Code Reform Commission. Brent Farrell, public witness. Brent Sullivan, public witness. Len Rem, public witness. Great. Mr. Sullivan, I'll ask you to sit on the right. Perfect. And then Mr. Rem, if it's just the two of you, you can sit wherever you're comfortable. Next to each other is just fine. Great. All right. First, we will begin with Brent Sullivan, public witness.
Thank you so much. Back again. I think this is 5 or 6 times we've been here. And we have discussed at great length the importance of oversight in our community, access to justice for all. We've discussed at extraordinary length the current, both the pre-existing police misconduct as well as the active police misconduct. I sent to you, Madam Chairwoman, 2 days ago, extensive emails at the highest level of the MPD involving Kelly O'Meara, Ben Heyman, John Knutson, and others about a lot of the internal issues that we've been having, which is all the more reason why our 123-year-old criminal code, which in most states has been addressed in the 1950s and the 1960s, is just as important as all of these other measures. I don't see how Secure DC has a chance of being profoundly successful if the castle of Secure DC is based on the swampiness of corrupt behavior. That corrupt behavior is widely unaddressed. It's certainly unaddressed by the mayor. It's profoundly unaddressed by the deputy mayor, who have this kind of collective worldview that we must respect and honor all of our heroes, even the ones that the chief of police despise. At our last hearing, I provided you with evidence that's been propounded at great length by the last 4 consecutive chiefs of police who have stated emphatically that they must rehire dirty police officers, quote unquote. Those aren't my words, those are verbatim words. We found as the quality of our assistant U.S. attorneys continues in decline. Okay, 1 minute left. As our assistant U.S. attorneys, we used to be able to recruit the best and brightest from all over the world. That's no longer happening anymore. If we do not have a revised criminal code that treats criminal behavior in the public as well as in the police department to the highest level, if our supervisors throughout the U.S. Attorney's Office don't really focus on Burger, which is the general concept of we're here to do justice, not to win, the city's going to continue down the path that it's on. At great length, I've reached out to Matt Graves. I've reached out, as you well know, to just about everybody. I'm sure you've seen all my emails of all the people that I've reached out to. And so to have a criminal code that was created in 1901, I don't necessarily believe that reinstating the advisory group makes sense. The heavy lifting's already been done, but I don't understand why the criminal code updates don't seem existent. I mean, I understand with crime at an all-time high, well, not an all-time high, but certainly back to the early 1990s. I understand why addressing crime is paramount. I don't disagree in any form or fashion with that, but I don't understand why we're essentially forcing jurists to spend an exorbitant amount of time writing appellate law because this city has failed to define a simple assault. And so with that, I yield back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sullivan. Len Rem, public witness.
Hey, how you doing? Excuse me. Hello, how are you doing? My name is Len Rim. I'm a local community activist. I've been active here since the early 2000s when we had the control board, and afterwards with Anthony Williams to pass laws, get candidates elected, raise money for both parties, as well as interact with the public on business levels and cultural levels. I'm just going to stick to the public safety issues that I see that I share with most of the public that is voting and paying taxes. And I'm gonna give you examples of what's in a triage style, which is the easiest thing to fix. This is the highest level emergency immediately. And I would just start off with under the traffic laws that we have on the books that can be enforced, unless they're unconstitutional and they are able to be updated in this time in the common law and the practice law that are on the books, they should be enforced. And if you have some version of SOD or traffic cops, they should work, or the 19 other agencies that have jurisdiction outside of their areas to protect our business sector without raising up our taxes, because it's already in the budget. All right. And we're working on the budget right now, and we're trying to get everybody to get online so we can get public safety up to where it needs so we can be safe. And then the second thing is we have individuals that are seeking to stop law enforcement by let's just give an example. Like there's business owners in the business sector that lost faith in the government and lost faith in the police force that actually will hire individuals that aren't official licensed security personnel that they normally might have been calling the police on to scare individuals or to intimidate individuals. And that could lead to them getting financial gain. But this, would need some type of probe or investigation. This is just what I have firsthand experience on. And under the personal story, and I got less than a minute, I had a run-in as a community activist with a person who was doing some illegal activities in my building. He confronted me with a gun. He then fled from the building. I didn't call the police because I really was trying to talk to the person next. And then next thing I know, he called the police on me. And then I reported that he had a gun and that he threatened me. And the police did not follow up on that. And then I tried to talk to the sergeant. I didn't get to speak to the sergeant because I'm a community activist. I had active information that I would always rely to them if it was a real emergency on the line, like guns or murder. I had a direct line to the actual commander of the whole area. So you know me personally, it was no reason for that officer not to tell me who the supervisor was. And that led to the second situation where I was going out recently in downtown area and I was basically shot and attacked not too long ago, being as a community activist. And I was just telling people they could call the police and they were safe and it was okay. They can, stop using their phones as weapons and trust in the systems that they can believe in. The police are right here with me. They're patrolling around me. I'm riding around on my bike. I'm calming people down. And right after that, some guy that works at a liquor store that doesn't want anybody to say that, he wants this personal security, hire some guy to come up to me and threaten me, pull out a gun, and attack me right on 15th and Connecticut Avenue like 3 weeks ago. Guns and knives. I had to defend myself in the middle of the street. It's me and my bike. But the first situation led to the second situation. If you don't believe in your institutions and don't challenge them in a place where you're accountable, we say, hey, this is the law. If somebody under the Fifth Amendment, under the Ninth Amendment, two parties have the exact same claim to the law, and it's the greater claim that has the right to proceed forward as far as prosecution. So being that we both were alleging a threat, being that the person A, who was calling the police, already gave up his rights, then said you can't call the police and not let them search you, for one. And then for two, he had a gun and I didn't have a gun, and I believe that his gun was illegal. So the search should have happened. They should have verified that the gun was legal or not legal, and then said, hey, this guy has a gun, so you shouldn't be scared of the community activist who's been here, who's not involved in drugs, to take a drug test and say, I don't have anything to do with law. That led to police not wanting to enforce the law, which led to my second situation. I had to wait on the police, and the police did their job, and the paramedics did their job. But then I went to GW Hospital right after that, and I literally have people that when I'm not around, the city goes down because I go around and calm people down. It's on my own dollar. I go around, I make a connection to people, I calm them down, I let them know what they have so they don't go wild. And I was at GW, and they refused to treat me for a gunshot wound, or it was just only like a 25 calibers, just a deflection off my arm, a little bruise right here. And I still got the indentation. I still haven't been medically treated. And some people treat me like I'm Superman or some prophet. I'm just a regular citizen, as far as I know, that's working on my own dollar, trying to help people stabilize things. Like after the chaos of 9/11, when I went around to help establish drug courts and get medical marijuana through the ballot initiatives. Okay. And thank you for my testimony, and thank you for your diligent work for the people.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Wren and Mr. Sullivan. I appreciate you both being here today. And Mr. Wren, I'm so sorry to hear what happened to you. When you said that somebody hired somebody else to threaten you, how do you know that that happened, and what was the result of this case? Is this moving through the system?
Yes, this is a current investigation. And like I always say, I'm also a political strategist, and I do speech writing. I always tell my politicians, if you got a current investigation, never comment on that, because the press is asking, you don't have to answer. But in this case, because you have oversight and you definitely have access to classified information, As far as I know, there is an investigation going on, and what I observed was in areas where you have no right to privacy, when you're in open public, where there's clear cameras at, and you do not have the right to tell the cameras to cut off. So what I observed were people that were acting in a way that allowed me to see that there was a pattern of behavior that was leading to A, situation, and then B, would occur because you did certain stimuli, and the response came from the individuals that are responding to the stimuli that you have. So I observed this over the course of many months and years, and I documented it on various different platforms. I backed them up. I wrote about them, and I contacted law enforcement, the legislative branch, and tried to mitigate it until I ended up in these situations where the public meets situations that aren't fully understood. I don't blame any party. I just think that we need to come together and understand what is accepted and what is not, and what we can do. And I hope to be a person that will be here for the council, for the mayor's office. I'm trying to help the council out with the public safety and talk to the public about it. I'm trying to help out the executive office with the budget and with other public safety issues, as I've been doing all the time behind the scenes. And now I'm just becoming more public so people can hold me accountable and also call upon me if they feel under any duress that I and individuals like myself can do. Because ultimately, as citizens, we have to hold ourselves accountable and understand that we can't criticize things that we don't understand. All right. I often talk in rhymes or allegories so that children can understand me, because if you, as a child, you accept true understanding of things that you don't understand. It's only as an adult you accept things that you don't understand, and you do them without investigating to yourself what that means. So you get mad at your car not working, but you won't go underneath of your car and find out how your car works. A child won't do that. You get mad at your computer not working, but you don't look how your computer works. Often it only takes a day or two just to have a basic understanding. You get mad at the law, but you won't open up a LexisNexis or Gold Coast or go to your local law library. Look at the criminal code. Look it up. Does it make sense to you? It is in Latin, but there are translations from Latin to English. And this is the basis of your society that you're in. You look on your dollar, it says in numeri. I'm not going to say all that, but it's in Latin and in English. You need to understand these things. You can't get rid of everything you don't understand if these things have been around you this whole time. It takes a little bit of time. And thank you very much. Sorry. I'll go.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Mr. Sullivan and Mr. Rem. And Mr. Sullivan, as you know, we're following up on your case, and we've been in touch. We're going to move on to the government witnesses. We're not making any.
That kind of a statement has become enormously predictable. I mean, probably 10 apologies from you, Madam Chairwoman, and a lot of promises. Do you have any timeline on when you're going to follow up? I mean, I haven't heard from you in a year.
Mr. Sullivan, you've heard from us within the last week. We are following up on your case. As you know, we've been in touch back and forth. And so we look forward to getting closer to a resolution soon.
But I guess the question is when? I mean, we talk about police accountability and
Mr. Sullivan, as we talked about last time, we're not having this public dialogue here. I'm not answering questions from our
okay.
public witnesses.
All right, just wanted to give you a chance.
We are following up on your case. We have been in touch within the last week. And we're waiting for all of the participants who will be in your meeting, as you know. So we'll look forward to
We'll
having
see.
that meeting
Thank
soon.
you.
Thank you. I will now call on our government witness, Janu Park, Executive Director of the Criminal Code Reform Commission. Welcome, Director Park. As you know, it is the tradition of this committee to swear in all government witnesses who appear before it. I can ask you to raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you are about to provide before the Council of the District of Columbia and this committee is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. I'd now like to invite you to make any opening statement that you may have.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Pinto, and thanks for holding this oversight hearing on the CCRC. Again, I'm Janu Park, the agency's executive director. So the prior 12 months since the last time I testified before this committee at a performance oversight hearing has been challenging, to say the least. But I am still very proud of the work that the CCRC has performed and the various contributions that we've made to the criminal code over that time. So it was just less than 1 year ago that President Biden signed Joint House Resolution 26, which blocked the RCCA from going into effect. So this obviously had an immense effect on the CCRC's operations over the remainder of FY23 and FY24 to date. So I'll discuss some of the work that we've engaged in over that time, how we've continued to move forward with our code revision reform efforts, and how the lack of a modernized code has continued to affect the district. So perhaps the largest change in the CCRC's work in FY23 and 24 as compared to prior years has been a much greater involvement in providing testimony before this committee. In prior years, the CCRC was focused more heavily on drafting the revised criminal code, and we would only occasionally provide testimony on pending criminal legislation. But over the past 9 months, providing testimony and feedback to this body has consumed actually a significant amount of the agency's time. We've also continued to revise cluster of offenses that were not included in the RCCA. So we've already issued first draft revisions to animal cruelty offenses, and we're continuing to research and produce recommendations related to public corruption and bribery offenses. In addition, in response to some novel conduct that we've seen around the country, we're also researching and beginning to formulate recommendations for potentially new offenses related to abuses of artificial intelligence that are not adequately covered by current district law. And so I expect over the remainder of FY24, we'll produce additional recommendations related to public corruption and bribery, AI, and potentially some traffic offenses under Title 50. We've also undertaken efforts to determine both statutorily authorized penalties for serious offenses nationwide and actual sentencing practices nationwide. So as I noted in my written responses to this committee's pre-hearing questions, I believe a main reason why the Congress and the president struck down the RCCA was a false perception that it's unusually lenient on crime. So we made clear that the penalties including the RCCA are fully consistent with current DC sentencing practices. And we've undertaken 2 major research projects to show that it's actually consistent with national law and national practices as well. So first, we've been thoroughly researching the maximum allowable sentences across all 50 states for a series of handful of serious offenses. Now, because each state's code is complex with its own sentencing rules and penalty enhancements, this has been a very time-consuming task. But having really concrete research to demonstrate that the RCC's penalties are squarely within national norms may help address misconceptions that the bill was unusually lenient. Second, the CCRC has been researching actual sentencing practices across the nation. So again, the penalties in the RCCA are consistent with district sentencing practices, but without robust national data, it's hard to determine whether or not it's consistent with national practices. And at the House Judiciary Subcommittee hearing that was held in October of last year, one witness claimed, quote, "The judges in the District Superior Court have eroded accountability in the criminal justice system by their notoriously light sentences across all categories of crime." But the witness provided no data whatsoever to support this claim. And based on our research, there's actually surprisingly little in the way of publicly available data on national sentencing norms. So the CCRC was able to obtain access to sentencing data from nearly 14 million cases compiled over prior decades across a majority of the states across the nation. And this includes both data as the initial sentence that was imposed upon conviction, as well as prison admission and release dates, which can be used to determine the actual amount of time that was served. This admission and release date is especially important as the district does not have a parole system. And in most cases, there is no mechanism for sentence modification. So when comparing district sentences to other jurisdictions, it's vital to determine the amount of time that's actually been served, as persons convicted elsewhere are usually eligible for some form of early release. So the CCC is still analyzing this data, but when the analysis is complete, we'll be able to provide extremely detailed analyses of actual sentencing practices from across the nation. And as far as we can tell, this would be an unprecedented data source for this council and other policymakers to rely upon. And I should note, although both of these research projects are still underway, our preliminary results do indicate that the RCCA's penalties and current district sentencing practices are well within national norms. Now, finally, I'd like to take this opportunity to highlight the many ways in which our work throughout the second half of FY23 and 24 to date have further demonstrated the ongoing need for comprehensive criminal code revision. So the various pieces of criminal legislation upon which the CCRC provided testimony often included many sensible ideas, but ones that had already been included in the RCCA. So this includes things like creating a felony offense of reckless endangerment with a firearm, increasing penalties for possession of certain highly dangerous firearms, such as ghost guns or automatic weapons, treating strangulation as a felony, and updating sex offenses to ensure that contractors and volunteers in schools can be held liable for sexual conduct with students. And while these changes were all important and worthwhile, they really represent just a tiny fraction of the improvements that would have been made as part of the RCCA. Now, often the CCRC would recommend a change to draft language, but have to note that while addressed one problem, several related problems went unaddressed. In other instances, revising current statutes to achieve some desired policy outcome was needlessly difficult because the current code does not have a general part with its large glossary of defined terms and generally applicable defenses and other legal doctrines. We've also seen the DC Court of Appeals continue to grapple with basic issues of law that would have been resolved as part of the RCCA. So, for example, in November of last year, the DCCA issued its decision in Bruce v. United States, a case in which a defendant was convicted of possession of a high-capacity ammunition device. Fortunately, the current statute doesn't specify any culpable mental state, that is, whether any degree of awareness was required as to the capacity of the ammo device. Because the code is silent on this basic issue, the DCCA judges had to perform what is essentially a legislative function in specifying the requisite mental state. The DCCA ultimately decided that the defendant had to know the capacity of the ammo device in order to be convicted of that offense. Now, the RCCA had clearly specified a mental state for this element under the analogous offense and had made it clear the defendant did not have to know the exact capacity to be convicted of this offense. So the lack of revised code consumes time and resources of the court, the defense bar, and the U.S. Attorney's Office. And the result of all this time and resources spent was an outcome that was at odds with the policy decision embodied of the council's policy preferences as embodied by the RCCA and in the Secure DC bill, and led to a conviction being reversed. And so we've seen this time and time again over prior years, and undoubtedly we'll continue to see it in coming years until this council can pass a modernized comprehensive code revision bill. More recently, I've received several questions from this committee's staff about issues in Secure DC that, again, would have been resolved under the RCCA. So, for example, when can consent operate as a defense to the newly proposed strangulation offense? Does carjacking liability apply if a person uses force to take their own car that they co-own from another person? Does carjacking liability apply if a person uses force to take a car back after it's been repossessed? These are all really important questions, and I applaud your staff from taking the time to do this really detailed work. But the RCCA, again, had already addressed these issues. And while I really look forward to working with your team to make sure that these issues are properly addressed as part of Secure DC, they leave countless other issues unaddressed. So we may well clarify the role of consent as applied to the strangulation offense, but left unresolved is how consent applies to the array of other assault offenses under the current code. And even just within the scope of the law of assault, there are several important unresolved issues. So, for example, what degree of force may a victim of a home invasion use to defend themselves or their family? Can a person fearing inevitable but non-imminent harm use force to defend themselves? What degree of force can a person use to protect themselves against an imminent sexual assault? These are all really important questions of laws that may determine whether victims of crimes themselves can be subject to criminal prosecution. Piecemeal revisions are certainly worthwhile, but they just can't address the scope of problems that we have under our current code. So these past months have obviously been deeply challenging for the district, and it's resulted in several attempts to address the acute crime crisis that's currently facing our city. And so given those challenges, I completely understand why revisiting the RCCA has not really been this committee's focus. But the enormous structural flaws that the RCCA would have fixed remain in place, and they will continue to undermine public safety, consume scarce resources, while failing to provide the basic level of good governance that district residents deserve. So I still believe deeply in the need for comprehensive code revision, and that this council can pass a version of the bill that will garner broad public support within the district and also survive scrutiny from the federal government. And if I include more detailed thoughts on this issue in my written responses that I submitted last week. So to conclude, I want to thank you, Chairman Pinto, for holding this hearing, and I look forward to working with you and your staff in the coming years to ensure that criminal code lives up to the standards that district residents deserve.
Well, thank you very much, Director Park, and thank you to you and your team for your consultation and partnership on a number of issues affecting our criminal code that we have been prioritizing in the committee. I do think it's important reminder of the sad reality that the district is not a state. And so it's not always just a matter of what our priorities or desires are, but we have to be realistic about the reality that for the first time in 3 decades, Congress stepped in, including the president of the United States, the Democratic president of the United States, to overturn a district law. And so let's talk a little bit first about what happened with the RCCA. From your own perspective, why do you think the RCCA failed to pass through Congress?
So I think there was an insufficient understanding of what the bill was really all about and the problems that it was attempting to address. And so I don't believe that outside of a small number of exceptions to this, I don't think many members of Congress had any real idea about the structural flaws in our criminal code I doubt they had any idea that many of the home states that they themselves represent had undergone a very similar code revision project decades ago. And in part because there wasn't a real true story and narrative about all the positive affirmative good that the RCCA would have done. Instead, a really genuinely small number of contentious issues really sort of swamped the narrative. And a lot of those concerns are well-founded, though I think in many regards they're somewhat misstated and were somewhat overblown. But we're up in a position where this was the bill that didn't modernize districts' criminal code in the way that states like Kentucky and Texas did 40, 50 years ago. It became the bill that's lowering penalties for carjacking. And once that narrative was baked in, especially given the political situation, not just locally, but really at the national level, I think that many of the people on the Hill and even in the White House were not making a decision based on the genuine substance of the bill, but they're making a political calculation as to what sort of attack ads they'd be facing. And so I think in a second version of this, this body, myself certainly will be much more proactive, at least really starting with the local media level of explaining both to the media and to district residents the affirmative good that this bill is going to do, while also recognizing, well, unfortunately, we're not a state. And so the federal government does have this oversight over the district. And so there will have to be substantive changes made such that when the political calculation comes around the next time, hopefully it doesn't, that they'll be in a strong position where they can say, we're just upholding the district's attempts at good governance to create a more transparent, just code in the way that most states have, and that they've addressed the concerns that led them to strike down the bill in the first place.
Was there education of the bill and what it aimed to do to members of Congress?
It was fairly limited. So I held two different briefing hearings, first with staffers on the House side and then some staffers on the Senate side as well. We also spent a lot of time just producing a bunch of sort of summaries and fact sheets that we then distributed to pretty much any and all staff on the Hill. And we did also receive some questions back from staffers about specific provisions in the bill. So that was the extent of the outreach. Of course, this was all sort of 11th hour. This was often in the week or so preceding the votes. I don't know how much of that input necessarily made it back to the members and to what degree it actually influenced their decisions. I do know that some members were very good about this and even cited some of the materials that we provided to them and some of the information that we provided to them when it came time to vote to uphold district autonomy. But by and large, and to be honest, even if they had been taking the greater effort to learn about the details, they're politicians, and I think they may have been thinking about their next reelection campaign as much or more so than they were thinking about the true substance of the bill that was going to affect district residents.
Right. Well, because we could make that argument for anything with the Hill, right? That there are lawmakers that have an outsized influence on district matters because we're not a state yet. When you talk about possible amendments or changes that may need to be made to withstand federal scrutiny, what types of things are you contemplating that may need to be compromised on? Similarly, the mayor in her veto letter suggested, there was about 95% consensus, but 5% that she didn't agree on. So where do you think that 5% or so lies?
Yeah, well, I can't exactly speak from there. I know that a lot of objections related to the maximum penalties for a handful of offenses. Your predecessor, Councilmember Allen, did increase them compared to the preliminary draft of what the RCC had allowed for. It's possible that some of those penalties are increased further, potentially just back to where they are under current law or even higher. And then the mayor, I believe, had some objections to second look expansion and to the expansion of jury trial, near universal jury trials. And so potentially there is some room for compromise and negotiation there as well.
But those two components weren't part of the revised criminal code, right?
They were. So part of the recommendations were to broaden out jury trial rights to be consistent with the practice in 40 plus states around the nation. And then to broaden second look as well was part of the recommendations within the RCCA. But again, if those are issues on which compromise can be reached, then so be it.
Okay, so you consider those two substantive policy changes as part of the recommendations of revising the criminal code?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. So given where we were at the start of 2023 with this overturn, how do you view the commission's work going forward? What type of work did you do in 2023 and now in the start of 2024 to fulfill your mission?
Yeah, so a significant amount of our time, like I said, was went to producing testimonies, which hopefully you and your staff are familiar with. And like I said, in prior years, it was a dramatic increase in the amount of time and resources we spent on that. So in prior years, we may have provided testimony on 9 or 10 pieces of legislation over the span of 5 or 6 years, whereas in the last 9 months alone, we provide testimony on, I believe it was 8 separate pieces of legislation. So it was several
I couldn't hear
times.
those numbers. Could you say that again?
What's that? So I believe it was 8 pieces of legislation that we provided testimony on in the past 8 or 9 months, compared to maybe 10 over the prior 6 years. So it was definitely consumed a significant amount of time, and we really did our best. And I think my team did a great job having very detailed, heavily footnoted testimonies. But like I said, yeah, then the other work that we've also been doing is sort of thinking ahead to how to address some of the political misconceptions and critiques that were surrounding the RCCA the last go around. So we weren't as proactive and weren't as potentially as prepared to say, here's exactly how this bill stacks up, not just to current law and current sentencing practices, but to national norms. Because I think most people don't necessarily have an inherent sense of what's normal when it comes to both the maximum sentences allowable and actual sentences that are handed down. So having that kind of robust data to go forward with, whether it's meeting with ANCs or it's meeting with reporters, and at the outset, as opposed to being on the back foot saying, here's what our bill does, and here's how it compares to national norms. Look, it's actually squarely within, or at times often actually much tougher than many states, including even many red states, so that those kind of misconceptions can be addressed at the outset, as opposed to having to rush and try to scramble to do this research once people are criticizing it at the later stages. And then again, there was work that even had the federal government not intervened that had to be done with respect to the RCCA. So prior to its applicability date, which was scheduled to be in October of 2025. So like I said, there was a cluster of offenses that hadn't been revised as part of the RCCA. We had to update commentaries because the commentaries were drafted as based on the original initial draft that we produced, not the sort of final version the council had voted on. Those commentaries would still need to be updated at some point. And they're just a handful of minor issues. We had sort of this very long to-do list of issues that had not been fully resolved in the RCCA that perhaps we need to go back and fix and address. So there was always going to be a lot of work that we had to do, even if the federal government had not interfered, that still needs to be done, pushing forward ahead. To say nothing of the additional work that we've been done to help work with this council as to, again, more acute attempts to address the crime situation in the district.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you mentioned in your testimony some other projects that you are working on, particularly around animal cruelty and public corruption. So first, just in terms of your process, how does your office determine which projects to take up? Who are you taking guidance from? And how do you determine the direction of your next project?
Yeah, so part of this is when we first did the RCCA, we try to identify the offenses that are actually commonly charged. There are hundreds, probably at least 750 to 800 various offenses scattered across the criminal code, many of which are either never used or rarely used. So in the first go around with the RCCA, the priority was let's address the offenses that are most often used. And so the RCCA covers, other than drug offenses, the offenses that comprise more than 90% of all charges within DC Superior Court. But then we try to look at other offenses that are actually used, but that were not included in that RCCA project. And so this is probably the most commonly charged ones are traffic offenses. But then again, things like public corruption, bribery, animal cruelty, which are not charged as often, but are still charged and therefore are sort of higher on the priority list on the next part of the to-do list for offenses. But also environmental offenses that haven't been revised. And then, like I said, there's probably hundreds of crimes that are genuinely never even prosecuted, which maybe long time down the road we could get to, but there's, I think for obvious reasons, sort of lower on the priority list.
But how do you determine the priority list?
So we have data from DC Superior Court that will tell us whether or not these offenses are actually prosecuted and how often. And so we can look to see, yeah, animal cruelty is actually charged and prosecuted. Not that often. There may be dozens of charges over the prior decade, but still more than zero, which is the case for actually the majority of criminal offenses on the books.
So would you say that animal cruelty cases were you say we look at the data to determine if it's actually charged, but they weren't charged that much.
Yeah.
So are there other metrics that you're considering to determine the next set on your priority list?
Yeah, and it's also a sense of, like I mentioned, so offenses related to artificial intelligence. If we think that there is a problem. So even if an offense isn't necessarily charged that often, but it has a particularly glaring problem that might sort of bump it up on the priority list. And so something like artificial intelligence uses and abuses sort of fit that bill. Currently, based on our research, the types of the provisions in district law that would address AI abuses, and so we're talking about things like deepfake porn and et cetera. At most, potentially we could rely on certain obscenity offenses or maybe civil provisions, so things like libel and defamation laws, things like that. But it doesn't seem like that's actually adequate. So this is an area of conduct which unfortunately seems to be growing more common and is not adequately addressed by current law. So right now we have one of our team members who I said he was going to work on some other stuff. So like, you know what, let's bump this up to the priority list. Let's focus on this because it's a genuine gap in law. If someone does it in the district, in many cases, it just may not be a crime, period. And so that's something that we feel it needs to be addressed sooner rather than later.
Right. Okay. Thank you. And tell me a little bit more about the public corruption work and what gaps are in our law and how we stack up to other jurisdictions and making sure that the law is strong and protecting the public interest.
Yes, I'm not exactly how it stacks up with other jurisdictions, but one of the challenges with public corruption and bribery is that there is a lot of protected legal conduct that sort of skirts the line of when we might consider something to be bribery. People obviously make financial contributions to public officials routinely, and there may be some expectation that that official will do something in exchange for that. And we want to make sure that legal political contributions, of course, are excluded, maintaining people's First Amendment free speech rights in that regard, while also ensuring that the law is clear and thorough and covers kinds of genuinely corrupt behaviors that we want to include. It's a challenge. This is one of those offenses in areas of law which often is described in a very circular way. So it may be that corruption is behaving corruptly and we'll just sort of let someone figure that out later. And so drafting the law in a way that's very clear, so it makes a very clear distinction between what's legal, what's illegal. It has been a challenge. That's still a process that we're still hammering out.
Okay. And do you have an expected timeline for those projects to be complete for animal cruelty recommendations, AI, and public corruption?
Yeah, so we've submitted a first draft and the advisory group no longer formally exists. So this is the group that had reviewed and provided feedback and approved the original recommendations that made up the RCCA. But on an informal basis, we still send them drafts and consult with them to say, hey, we worked on a first draft of animal cruelty offenses. If anyone wants to weigh in and let us know about things that ought to be changed, we're happy to take their input. So we issued a first draft of that. We received some input. We just about finished up. Will be a near final draft. So we should be publishing that shortly. And I do believe that within the remainder of this fiscal year, we'll be publishing at least our first drafts of public corruption, clusters of offenses, hopefully an AI offense, and then moving on to other Title 50 offenses. And I expect especially with Title 50 traffic offenses, that would be in much closer consultation with the Office of the Attorney General, seeing as that's the most common offense that office prosecutes, at least with respect to adults, setting aside their juvenile matters.
Okay. And animal cruelty as well?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. So you think all of those will be first draft recommendation by the end of the fiscal year?
Yeah, traffic offenses, it's less clear because it's a huge morass. We haven't actually sort of dove into that in detail. So that's less clear, but the public corruption and the animal cruelty should be finalized, or at least the draft should be out certainly by this fiscal year.
But okay, thank you. So tell me a little bit about your staff and what expertise or legal background some of them have. Do they include former defense attorneys, former prosecutors, practitioners, experts?
Yeah, at this point we do have 3 former defense attorneys on our staff. And then we have one staffer who's not an attorney, she's our data scientist. So she's been the person who takes the lead, for example, on analyzing these 14 million cases of data that we have around the country. So yeah, the 3 attorneys though are, 2 of them had practiced for years here in the district. So they have sort of extensive experience both with district law, district practice, just the day-to-day goings on in the court, sort of, all that minutia. Our other attorney who had practiced in Virginia, but she's been in the project even longer than I have. And so she has spent years and years on this and knows so many ins and outs of the revised code. So definitely have developed, and everyone has been here at the very least for as much as 10 plus years. And if not, I guess our most newest staffer has been here for about a year, but everyone else has been here for multiple years. And has really developed a lot of institutional expertise as just sort of a lot of the nooks and crannies of the RCCA and how things operate. And so the team is great. And I hope none of them leave. I believe they're all happy because they're extremely difficult to replace because of their innate talents and abilities, and also the expertise that they've developed over time working with the CCRC.
Okay, well, thank you. And I extend my gratitude to them as well. And how do you resolve a conflict in recommendations? So if multiple members on your team come to a different conclusion about the clarity or consistency of how the criminal code should be structured, what do you do?
Traditionally, what we've often looked to is what happens in other jurisdictions and also in the model penal code. So we try to determine what the best practices are. So if there's a dispute, we may say, well, what's the majority practice around the country? And also, what have experts said? What have law professors written about? Writing about the law of fraud or writing about the law of assault. Like, what arguments in pro and favor, are there for the particular dispute? And then, of course, we just bring our own judgments to it to say this makes sense, this does not make sense. This would be a just outcome or an unjust outcome. Should note again, we haven't relied on this for the animal cruelty offenses, but we also conducted a series of public opinion surveys within the district to get a sense of what district residents feel as to the relative severity of offenses. This is research that had never been done, to our understanding, within the district, and is rarely done anywhere, actually. And it provided a really interesting breakdown of when we asked just residents to rate the relative severity of different kind of hypothetical crimes, and they would say, yeah, we think this one is worse than that one, or no, these two are actually quite similar. And so relying on that source of input was also important in resolving sort of ambiguities and points of conflict. And of course, at the late stages of lawmaking, of course, consultations with the council members, because of course, it's this body that has to pass and approve any piece of legislation. As I said, Councilmember Allen made a number of changes to the RCCA that differed from our initial set of recommendations. I know you proposed amendments, and surely in any other future RCCA, I'm sure that there would be disagreements that various members would have with specific provisions, and members would of course then be free to say, we want it to be this way, and then rewrite the statute accordingly. So there definitely been plenty of different mechanisms to resolve these differences of opinion.
Okay. And shifting slightly to external influences, what government agencies or advocacy groups and independent data or information sources do you generally consult with when formulating your recommendations? And how do you ensure that policy or political biases aren't overcoming a more objective legal analysis of proposed provisions?
So it's one about just really, again, trying to cast a wide net. This is why we, again, look to practices in other states. Like say, we often take a lot of inspiration from deep red states like Texas and Alaska and Kentucky, as much as we do from blue states. So trying to get outside of a silo, not just looking at one source, but looking at an array of authorities. We also try to be, to the extent possible, really data-driven about this. So this is why we have one of the most detailed analyses on current district sentencing practices, and why the project that I talked about earlier in my testimony, we're trying to really ascertain what are sentencing practices from around the nation. Because again, based on our research, there is no, at least publicly available, clear database to know, for example, what's a typical sentence that someone might get as a first-time offender for armed robbery, for example. I think most people, even many attorneys, don't have an intuitive sense of what that might be. And because there's no anchoring for that number, two reasonable people might reach completely differing conclusions as to what they think an appropriate sentence might be for that particular crime, for that particular person. And so it's really helpful to have national norms and actual hard data to say, hey, typically a sentence for this offense is X years. That seems sensible. Not that the district needs to be bound by what other jurisdictions have put in place, but it's a really nice anchoring and grounding piece of information that helps really guide decisions going forward. Which is why I'm really excited about that project, because again, I think there is no source for that currently available anywhere. Like this would really be an unprecedented data source, not just for us to use, but really, the intent is that this would become, we would post this publicly, and that really anyone else within district government or elsewhere would be able to access it and then make these determinations. So I think using as much data as we can is also a really important factor that guides our decision making.
And that project is being undertaken by your data scientist?
Yeah, so she's really taking the lead. The rest of us are lawyers who are not as savvy with statistics. But so she's really taking the lead on that. Margaret Bronstein, who's doing a really fantastic job. It's daunting. Like I said, this is really one person. I advised her on it. We talk out certain questions. But again, this is millions and millions of data points. Some of the data is kind of messy. It needs to be cleaned up. But already the preliminary results, again, I said, are really fascinating that we can go see what the median sentence is, again, for armed robbery or for burglary in Colorado or in Kansas or nationwide, or what the 90th percentile sentence or the 98th percentile sentence is, to really get a sense of how these things are actually genuinely handled, as opposed to pulling it out of thin air. Because I think often, like I said, even I have attorney friends who their car was stolen and they just had no sense of what the range of penalties would be. 15 years, 20 years? I said, probably not, guys. But they had no idea, right? And so they were just kind of just making up a number that maybe in their gut moment felt appropriate. And they're angry that their car got stolen, which is obviously understandable. And so I think for all policymakers, having a more detailed and database grounding is really important when we make these policy decisions.
And when do you expect that project to be complete?
I don't know. So like I said, it is enormous, and I don't think this has ever been completed before. I've talked with other folks that I met at various sentencing conferences and said, like, do you have a database like this that I could just check up? And they were like, that would be good to have. And we've sort of thought about it. No one's really done it as far as I can tell. So I don't know if it'll be completed by the end of this fiscal year, to be perfectly honest, just because it's extremely time intensive. Ms. Bronstein's been working on this at this point now for only a couple of months, and part of that includes, time off right around the holidays. It was a pretty arduous process just to get access to the data. Actually, it took months. We had to have an independent review board review our research methodology and actually sign off to make sure that it wasn't abusing anything, that it wasn't going to be divulging sensitive or individualized information, before the organization that actually compiles the data would even allow us to have access to it. And so that alone took months. And we have until June in which we can still play around with the data, and then finally export the analyses, assuming they approve it, which I expect they will.
And who's the they?
So this is handled through the Bureau of Justice Statistics, BJS, is sort of a subfield within the Department of Justice. It's administered through an organization with the University of Michigan. So we actually can't go into the database ourselves. We actually have to use a remote virtual desktop. This is all for security purposes, run through the University of Michigan to get any access to this data, which setting that up itself was a bit of an ordeal. But yeah, so they're very, very sort of tightly controlled, this data, because it's sensitive, because it has theoretically individual persons from around the country, their criminal records. And so they want to make sure that we're anonymizing everything and that we're not divulging sensitive information, which we don't intend to, and we won't. So it would be great if we had a final report or the data out by this fiscal year, but there's a decent likelihood that it will not be, or at the most that we may have, say, preliminary findings. Part of what's interesting about this is our hope is that we'll have a really, really rich data set that we can export from the system sometime this summer that we can do maybe preliminary analysis of, but that even, say, a year later, we could look back and say, hey, we want to know how, for example, sentencing trends differ across regions. So maybe the mountain region or the West Coast or the Southeast have starkly different ways they treat a particular offense. And we can probably do that research sort of after the fact. And so it depends how extensive our sort of initial crack of the analysis would be. I mean, ideally, we want to have a very, very thorough analysis of sentencing trends across a large number of offenses. But again, because this is pretty much unprecedented work, I don't know exactly how long it'll take, unfortunately. But already I'm very excited at the preliminary findings that we've had.
Well, it sounds like an amazing project and certainly very useful, not only for us in the district, but around the country. Can you get any support from the federal government? It seems like something the federal government should be undertaking.
In theory, I suppose. I mean, I don't know why no one else has appeared to do this research in the past. But like I said, our data science is doing a really great job of it. So I think we've got we'll be able to finish the work. Could it go a little faster with extra hands? I'm actually not sure. It may be one of those projects where, if you get too many cooks in the kitchen, it will sort of slow things up a bit. And so it may be a little bit more efficient to crank through this way. But it may be worth, reaching out to other partners to say, does anyone ever want to collaborate or at least use the final results that we're able to produce? Because I do think it'll be useful, not just to us, but to many people around the nation.
Right. Well, I'm sure a lot of people will want to use it. I just am thinking about the onerous and the stress on just your team and handling this clearly nationwide project.
Yeah, I mean, it has to some degree put off, we had produced a pretty detailed analysis of DC sentencing practices from between 2010 and 2019. We were intending to update that analysis for more recent years. I include this in more detail in my written remarks. That had to be put off simply because DC Superior Court was a little bit delayed in getting us updated data. From what I understand, this is because they actually themselves are undergoing a major overhaul of their data reporting and recording systems over there. So they gave us partial update, not all the data requested, only in November of last year. At that point, our data scientist was deep in analyzing this national data, and we're still waiting for fuller updates. But we also hope to have updated, like I said, these detailed sensing data from the district covering the years 20 to at least 22, which I think will be really fascinating to see how sensing practices changed during the pandemic years. Because I know the Sensing Commission has put out some analysis on this front, but I would love to have just an easily searchable database to look across every single offense that's been charged, to look at, to parse it out into detail about, we can look at people first-time offenders versus repeat offenders, people are convicted of one offense, when they're convicted of multiple offenses, and find the medians and all the quantiles. So hyper detailed data covering the pandemic years will, I think, be really, really useful for the district. Though, again, we're still waiting on updated data. So that project's a little bit on the back burner for now.
Gotcha. Okay, well, thank you and congratulations. And please extend my thanks to woman on your team who's handling this huge project. I want to ask you about updates to office space. This is something we talked about last year. Have you had a move? How are conversations going?
No, so I had some conversation with DGS about this. And at first it sounded great. So they identified some office space in 441 4th Street that would be larger, have actual offices and windows, better ventilation, et cetera. I had set up times, to ask, can I go down and check it out? And what they said was that it's next to some office space that they think, I believe, was Board of Elections also wanted to take over. And they would need to do some construction work to sort of set up this space so that it would be suitable. So their estimates were that the construction work would take something in the ballpark of $600,000 to complete. And I told them that given the size of that as a percentage of our annual budget, that's probably just not doable. And so unfortunately for now, we're not moving ahead with new office space purely just because, the cost just seems prohibitive given how large it is relative to our normal operating budget and given the broader budgetary constraints that the district's facing right now. We meet in person periodically, but we've been working remotely and occasionally heading into the office, and it may not be ideal, but we don't want to ask for a sum of that large from this committee, given the constraints that the district's facing.
Okay, so where are you working out of now?
So we're still been working mostly just remotely.
Just remotely.
Yeah.
Okay, but where is the office space?
Oh, so it is in the cellar of 441 4th Street. So if you go down to the bottom, there's a singular windowless room that has a handful of cubicles that's set up. That's still formally our office space as of now.
Wow. Okay. So have you been working remotely since?
We've been working pretty much since the beginning of the pandemic.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it. Okay, thank you for that update. Okay, well, that concludes my questions. I want to give you a chance, Director Park, if you have any final thoughts or something you want to add that we didn't get a chance to talk about.
No, so again, reiterate if I try to run through the litany of problems that remain unaddressed, we'd be here all week. So I just want to really reemphasize how I'm so glad that we're addressing a number of problems in the criminal code through Secure DC, but that there are literally thousands and thousands and thousands of other issues that are equally or even more important that have been left unaddressed. And you see how much time it takes to work through a single piece of legislation. Doing this on a piecemeal basis will be here another century till we can actually address all the problems. And so I just want to again impress upon you in this body of really the importance of revisiting the code revision project. Fully understanding that given the acute crisis, it is not the top priority. And encouraging this council and this committee to hopefully work with the executive so that that little 5% that we can find common ground on that, so that the 95% that the mayor's agreed is not just uncontroversial, but is really well, overdue and strongly needed, that we can get a bill that addresses that 95% through in a way that has consensus support within the district. And I think if we get consensus support within the district between both the council and the executive, that will further strengthen the position of many of our colleagues up on the Hill to actually stand with district autonomy. So I think we can get there. It will obviously take a lot of work, but I hope that this council's up for it. And of course, we're all dedicated here to continue on that project.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Director Park, to you and your team for all the work you do throughout the year. And thank you for joining us today. We are now going to turn to our second agency on today's agenda, the Office of the Deputy Mayor for Public Safety and Justice. Before I turn, oh, never mind. We're going to turn to public witnesses. And again, we're going to follow the committee's normal practice to hear first from public witnesses and then from our government witness, Deputy Mayor Lindsay Appiah. First, we will hear from our in-person public witnesses, Brent Farrell, Dwayne Falwell, Brent Sullivan, Raymond Whedon, Mr. Sullivan, if I can ask you to sit all the way on the right, my right, yeah, perfect. Mr. Whedon, okay, great, hi. Len Rem, Maya Martin Cadogan, okay, Christine Miller, all right, Brent Sullivan, public witness, please go ahead.
All right, thank you very much. I'd like to spend just a few moments today to talk about some recent evidence I received. As you well know, we've been working on a matter since 2018 in which several assistant U.S. attorneys and several police officers presented evidence to the court that's been found by the court to have been reckless disregard for the truth. There was a detective named Charles Vigiani who's actively investigating homicides in the 7th District, who worked with an assistant U.S. attorney named Jeffrey Nessler. And these individuals filed a false affidavit, which was signed by Judge Russell Cannon. It's taken an awful long time, but with FOIAs and subpoenas, it finally trickles in which these officers began to work together. Sean Rooney, Daniel Godin, Leslie Parsons, Matthew Bromland, Peter Newsham, Joseph Traynor, John Haynes, Ben Hyman, John Knutson, Raul Figueres, Bob Connie, Kelly O'Meara, and Leanne Turner. I've reached out on numerous occasions to the mayor, and I've reached out to the deputy as well. And as you can probably predict, never heard a response. From a social justice perspective, this is quite terrifying. And I'm going to show you here briefly, and I've submitted this already, but these are the emails between the police officers that I just named, talking about the fraudulent behavior of Charles Vigiani and Sean Rooney. And as I was looking at the long list of assistant U.S. attorneys and the long list of police officers, I thought to myself, at the lowest level, young police officers are going to make mistakes, but surely from a supervisory if I just go high enough, they'll rectify the fraud. Well, we have gone as high as you can go. And I was appalled at what I received last week. Marvin Heyman, who's the current chief of staff for the chief of police, worked overtime. I understand that chiefs of police cannot possibly know what's going on every issue. But if at the end of the day, the chief of police simply reports to the community what they are given by their staff, I would hope that somewhere in the hierarchy, there would be some level of integrity and accountability, which at the moment is profoundly non-existent. From what I've been able to gather over the last 6 or 7 years with judges and the DPS, numerous city council members, numerous hearings, is that one, attorneys like it when chiefs of police retain officers with dirty marks on their record. Because if a criminal happens to hit the roulette wheel with their officer, 65 gun cases get tossed out. If the officer is drunk as he's chasing his girlfriend on Connecticut Avenue, those cases get tossed out. My heart goes out to this family of this young man where an officer manslaughter last week, 10 bullets in his car. I don't hear anything at all anymore. I did years ago, but I don't hear anything at all anymore from the mayor's office or the deputy mayor. I think I've tried to go to her office every time I go to one of these hearings. I hear nothing at all about accountability. And then it occurred to me as I was reading the lengths at which these officers will go. Two things. Number one, a lot of junior officers are on these emails. So if you know that the MPD fabricated hospital exams to corroborate fraudulent affidavits, and you see the lengths at which police are willing to go to protect each other, what kind of example is that setting? And the second thing is that when
Mr.
you're
Sullivan, I'm sorry to interrupt you. You're a bit
Oh,
over
my
time, so
wildly
I'm
over
asking you to
time.
summarize
I'm
and
sorry.
wrap up.
I thought that I was going in the wrong way. But anyway, yeah, I don't. We're running out of people to go to when it comes to accountability.
Thank you. Raymond Whedon, public witness.
So good afternoon, Chairperson Pinto and members of the Public Safety Committee. My name is Raymond Whedon. I'm a Ward 7 resident, father of 2 public students, and Executive Director of Thurgood Marshall Academy. Today, I am here to underscore the urgent need for enhanced safe passage strategies in the district, which concerns our students, parents, and educators alike. For decades, our school has demonstrated how strong partnerships with city agencies and community-based organizations are critical to our student safety. Our commitment to ensuring the safety of our students is unwavering. We have actively engaged with vital resources such as DC School Connect and coordinate closely with safe passage workers and foster collaborative efforts with our local law enforcement officers. Despite these measures, though, our community was shaken by a distressing incident on February 9th, a robbery and shooting on our campus by an outsider to a student at 8 a.m. A stark reminder of the challenges we face and the imperative to bolster our collective efforts. The incident happened despite all partners and school folks doing precisely what we have asked for them daily. As you'll hear later on from 3 TMA caregivers, our partner Meyer Martin Cadogan of PAVE and others, our experience in Ward 8 is similar to those students and families across the city. And unfortunately, I will say that it has become normalized. I want to highlight the indispensable role of community-based organizations to foster safe environments for our children. There are initiatives alongside with Safe Passages and Safe Blocks, both of which TMA students helped to inform and develop the program 5 to 10 years ago. These efforts have helped to mitigate violence in the area, and the safety of the school and a number of our concerned caregivers has improved. Many have counted on TMA to find pathways to get students to and from home, not trusting the traditional methods. This includes our school spending thousands of dollars on ride share for students when they need to get home during evenings events or if their neighborhood is just unsafe. This includes how we work with neighborhood crossing guards and will monitor to make sure students are safe as pedestrians. I do want to acknowledge the efforts that Deputy Mayor Pia has made. I commend the leadership and the willingness to work and align a vision and unified approach for student safety. And there are some areas that can be consumed. This is limited to not to the drug trafficking that is directly underneath our school. We have an open air market in front of our co-located building, a Savoy Elementary School in TMA. The market is steps away from the police academy. It's directly under the windows of some of our youngest learners. By giving passive approval to drug dealing and other incidents, we're modeling for our students during their school day what our city deems to be important for our students. I can't imagine such a market being allowed to function in other areas of the city. However, the incident 2 weeks ago and others mentioned underscore the strategy's need for continuous improvement innovation. We must expand the successes of programs like those across the city, included but not limited to a point person in the building for safe passage workers, coordinating in their neighborhood, increasing the opportunities for Amada to move students to and from target areas to metro stations, similar to what is already used for Jackson Reed, Deal, and my understanding, Archbishop Carroll. When coordination is done well, incidents are significantly reduced and enhanced. We have seen that across our city with other schools. I close by urging the DC Council and the Deputy Mayor of Public Safety to consider our testimony and propose solutions and a call in action, and by strengthening the collaboration between schools, CBOs, and the city. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Whedon. Len Rem, public witness.
Thank you very much, committee. My name is Len Rem. I'm a local community activist, being active since 9/11 and every other period since the early 2000s, officially passing laws and trying to do the public work. I'm just going to read just a little bit of a proposal I'm putting forward to the executive branch here, to Congress, to the White House. I sent it. I also sent it to council members here. It's called Rehab of the Present, and I'm just not going to inundate with you with too much until we can actually talk about it. But I just want to just start from the passage right here, just a couple sentences. We need to end mass incarceration and lead to a new way forward for our people instead of making the rest of us just meet quotas and numbers. The police want to make arrests that heal the community. Why not have a new approach to dealing with drug addicts, like I helped with in the early 2000s, called drug courts, and the law that got established under Initiative 62, treatment instead of jail for first-time and nonviolent offenders, is the actual part of the DC code that we definitely can't all have consensus on, because I had that from the federal government by coming from through the control board. The DC council ratified it, and the mayor's office signed off on it. So we know that that's something that we can say all parties agreed on. Treatment instead of jail for first-time and nonviolent offenders. And I say that we should push to make as many drugs arrests as possible, and then offer, of course, when we have the right apparatus in there for these arrests, and then offer rehab to all of those that choose not to choose drugs over their life. And first off, there may be only individuals that that understand that being in the system may not be something they want. And this would help out the DC jail and all of the inmates that have to sit there with people that are going through drug withdrawals and they're going through detox, and they feel like their face is melting, and they feel like, because of my unfortunately illegal arrest where I had a guy, I was trying to save his life, who had an illegal gun and threatened me, and I ended up falsely incarcerated. While there, I evaluated to DC jail, and I noticed there was a lot of people that are in there that are this isn't in the text, but just to give you context while I was writing it, they literally have people that feel like their face is melting. They're using psychiatric drugs to basically bridge the gap on what they're feeling and what they're dealing with. These people are not having mental issues, or maybe the mental issues are underlining, but the larger issue is that they are drug addicts having withdrawals. And there's plenty of space now because of the renovation. I checked it out. They have whole wings that are available. You can put people into a 7-day, and this is, let me read direct quote, give them a special unit, a special diet that helps addict push out the toxins, and established after 7 to 10 days, when you detox the person, you could have a drug consultants that would be able to give an assessment and a treatment plan to see if they are able to move forward into diversion programs like the one I'm proposing, where I would have group homes linked up with a standardized way that they all would treat the persons and we could verify through cameras and technology that they're safe, and then also establish a way that they eat, a way that they can be tracked, all ankle monitors, and also just basically try to ease their mind by bringing in mental health professionals to come in and evaluate them. You can't fix everything, but this is triage. We just want to give the taxpayers a chance to get a cheaper route. It's cheaper to go this route. You can make a lot of arrests. You make things clean, and you put it on the individual and the community. Also, we want to keep these people in contact with their children. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate those ideas. Christine Miller, Citywide Board Parent Leader and ANC Leader from Parents Amplifying Voices in Education, otherwise referred to as PAVE.
Thank you, Chairwoman, for this opportunity to testify today. My name is Christine Miller. I'm a longtime PAVE parent leader and community chair of Advisory Neighborhood Commission 1A's Committee on Education, Youth, and Family, which serves the residents of Columbia Heights. Over the past year, my committee has conducted numerous community engagements in collaboration with our local partners, including PAVE, community-based organizations in our schools. These events were designed to reach residents in our neighborhood and across ward, and included simultaneous translation for our Spanish speakers. These engagements have provided invaluable feedback from our community members. They're guiding our advocacy efforts to both improve our education system and also address the safety needs of our students and families. ANC 1A represents Columbia Heights. It's a neighborhood that has seen a 39% increase in violent crimes over the last 3 years. In the middle of this is the Columbia Heights Education Campus, Tubman Elementary, and a number of adult public charter schools. Because of this continuing violence, our 14th Street corridor has been a safe passage priority area since the initiative began. Recognizing these ongoing challenges, we strive to create a safer environment for students that will reduce risk and then lead to an overall improvement in our life. We need to ensure that funding in these areas allows for better service and increased community safety. With the transfer of safe passages out to the Deputy Mayor of Public Safety and Justice, we're looking forward to building on existing strategies and finding new and innovative ways to be proactive in keeping our young people safe. In a recent conversation with the Deputy Mayor, she used a phrase, safety ecosystem. This concept underscores the importance of a holistic approach to safeguarding the well-being of our community, particularly our youth. Embracing this vision entails providing comprehensive care and ensuring that initiatives like the Safe Passage Program engage diverse groups that are directly impacted by the effects of violence and crimes. This allows us to develop and implement safety measures and support services that are tailored to our neighborhoods, building a sense of ownership and collective responsibility. To this end, I ask that the council ensures that the Safe Passage Program has resources dedicated to improved communication with all residents and greater coordination between our schools and agencies. The safety of our students necessitates a whole government and a whole community approach. It requires thoughtful consideration of key stakeholders and engagement with our trusted community stakeholders. It will also require continuous community outreach and education for residents, schools, families. And it must include resources that are language accessible both to the layperson, but also to our NEP and LEP communities. And I've attached several pieces of resolution or several resolutions that were passed at a publicly noticed. Happy to answer questions and share other questions.
Great. Thank you so much. And Mr. Whedon and Ms. Miller, you both kind of talk about this safe passage needs a little bit. And I want to ask you, Mr. Whedon, about the point person idea. Have you reached out to anyone in the Deputy Mayor's office about this as we consider the performance of the agency throughout the year? Think how we can better engage the Deputy Mayor's office when it comes to the expansion of safe passage. This is the first year that it's falling under the jurisdiction of the Deputy Mayor for Public Safety and Justice, under the theory that we really want to make sure that safe passage is connective to all the other services available.
So I'm a math teacher by trade, and I've fallen into this role as executive director. So we just did it. So we didn't ask for permission. We just coordinated with the folks who are in our building. I honestly, in the day-to-day operations of running a high school, even coming out here is a stretch. So no, I haven't directly reached out to it, but I do know of other schools who are taking more of a proactive stance, including their Marshall Academy. And the results and the coordination it has gotten this better. We thought that was our
The result of
got better. We thought that was our role from day one. So we just assumed that was the role. Unfortunately, our person couldn't make it down here. And so we do know that it does work, and just being able, like, I know everyone was in place that day because like we just did a quick text. So, hey, where is everybody? What happened? What's going on in terms of the incident? And just how quickly everyone responded and how quickly we were able to resolve the issue to the best of our ability was just a testament, I would say, of the coordination of Treon Brown in our building, but then also the partnership of others. So I have not directly spoken with them, but I do know others have.
Okay, thank you so much. How about you, Ms. Miller?
I've had a few conversations with our staff in the school, and I think as Mr. Whedon said, they could probably speak better to that than I can. But the conversations that I have had has been a disconnect between what's happening in the schools and of course, what's happening through the Safe Passage staff. And then also as a commissioner, there's a large disconnect between the community and the safe passages. And that I think does a disservice to the work that's being done and the work that needs to be done.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all very much. Appreciate your testimony. All right, Martin Cadogan. Annette Ivy. And I just want to make sure Brent Farrell and Dwayne Falwell are not here. Okay. Great. Well, Maya Martin Cadogan, Executive Director of Parents Amplifying Voices in Education, otherwise known as PAVE. Please go ahead.
Thank you and good afternoon, Chairperson Pinto, and to the members of the Committee on the Judiciary and Public Safety and committee staff. Thank you for having us here today. My name is Maya Martin Cadogan, and I'm a Ward 4 resident and the founder and executive director of PAVE, which stands for Parents Amplifying Voices in Education. For background, PAVE parent leaders are mothers, fathers, grandmothers, and other caregivers who share their stories, dig deeply into understanding education policy, and bring their voices to our city's leaders in order to impact the educational experience of all children in DC. This year, our parent leaders voted to prioritize safe passage, given the volume and severity of incidents youth witness or experience as they get to and from school. Safe passage is multifaceted. It includes personal safety, violence reduction, infrastructure, traffic measures, and all of that work must be coordinated. A critical through line are relationships because they're vital to building trust and keeping our community safe. There are a lot of people who are doing good work, but too often they are doing it in silos. We've hosted many conversations with violence interrupters, community groups, and school leaders across both DCPS and public charter schools to figure out where safe passage is working. And the common factor every time where the program is working is in reducing incidents is when all safe passage entities are working closely together. So our parent leaders formed coalitions with school leaders, policy experts, community organizations, and students to ensure their statement truly reflected the needs and vision of communities across DC. We want to extend deep gratitude to all the people doing great work on the ground who are lending their expertise and perspective to improve safe passage across the district, in particular our safe passage community-based organization partners at Growing Up DC and the team at Collaborative Solutions for Communities. Today, I'm going to focus on the aspects of the work around safe passage that fall under the Deputy Mayor for Public Safety and Justice. I know you asked questions about engaging with Deputy Mayor Apia, and we want to say that we sincerely appreciate her team's engagement with us through DC Parent Voice and Choice Week meetings and their commitment to keeping students safe through their Safe Passage, Safe Blocks program. The Deputy Mayor and her team have been extremely open to continued conversations with parents, school leaders, and others in our coalition, and we've shared these recommendations with them as well. So with our partners, some of our solutions include making sure that the CBOs that manage safe passage contracts are the ones that direct the safe passage workers. In places like KIPP College Prep, Johnson Middle School, TMA, Thurgood Marshall Academy that Raymond just testified about, and E.L. Haynes, the schools have a shared relationship and coordinate with the CBO, which has proven to be much more effective. At KIPP, that means that they've reduced incidents by 47%, which is really incredible. At E.L. Haynes, one of the things to note there is their safe passage contract is managed by someone who is also a parent at the school. That relationship makes their work more effective because it opens the lines of communication, regular feedback about the safe passage workers and where they should be stationed, and their knowledge of the school and the surrounding community. We want to be clear as we think about what this looks like to bring schools and safe passage workers together. This does not mean that there should be any change in the administrative management functions, meaning managing grants, paying the safe passage workers. The main change would be that they would just regularly work in partnership with school leaders to understand where they should be stationed, what to look out for to be ready to intervene, and or communicate about incidents and responses that are needed as quickly as possible. The second piece is identify model safe passage worker program partnerships with schools and host sessions with all stakeholders at those sites to share best practices with other schools and safe passage worker programs. One of the things that we've seen is like people can only imagine what they know. And so it's important that we lift up the model programs where it is working so other school leaders don't have to say what Raymond just said, which is they just guessed and did it, but actually people have an idea of what a great program looks like. The third part is to make sure that the coordination that we've talked about with school leaders above as the norm and not an outlier, which means we want to think about the structure of the grant program, allowing schools to have feedback into who the CBO partners are, so that schools can have a say in who those partners are and how the workers are performing and who they think is best serving their buildings. And then making sure that we have improved coordination between stakeholders. So DMPSJ should convene safe passage entities. We talked to MPD, DCPS, public charter school leaders. They all shared that they'd love more regular convenings with school leaders, and that would be really helpful to student safety. And then DCPS and public charter schools should convene in person for a citywide meeting with MPD, WMATA PD, Safe Passage Program leadership. We've really just heard so much that all this work is being done in a silo. People are kind of making assumptions about what they can and can't do. And I think just more in-person work together so people can get to know one another, who the right people to call are, would be so important. And the last piece is that we just want to make sure there's more data released about safe passage and safe blocks, safety incidents with year over year, type and amount of incidents, safe passage workers per school, and the capacity. Thank you for having us here today. And we hope that we can answer any questions that you might have about the work we've already done.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Annette Ivy, parent leader from Parents Amplifying Voices in Education, or PAVE.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Penton, members of the Committee on the Judiciary and Public Safety, and committee staff. My name is Annette Ivy. I am a native Washingtonian, Ward 7 resident, a parent, grandparent of a student who attends Thurgood Marshall Academy, and a parent leader with PAVE. I am testifying today because we, as a city, must do better for all our children and all our communities. Kids need our protection and opportunities for them to learn and explore without worrying about their safety. I'll start by telling you about my grandson, Jaden. He was robbed on his way to school 5 days after the school year started. Unfortunately, there wasn't supervision outside. Jaden was, of course, extremely upset, traumatized. Early this month, there was another robbery, this time to his best friend, again on the way to school. Since Jaden had experienced it himself, he wanted to be there to support his friend, but it brought all of those feelings back. Can you imagine what that must feel like for him, trying to be strong for his friend while still dealing with the trauma he endured? He worked through it, but he is understandably distraught. This is not a fair burden for our children to bear. I knew I needed to do something. I've been in DC my whole life and worked on these issues from all different vantage points for years. I understand that the budget is tight, but we need to prioritize our kids, period. First, we need more programming. There are so many great things happening at the school. I'm here today to ask you to work with other executive agencies to help build on what exists. I wrote a letter calling for more programming, especially in the morning before school. Instead of the kids waiting on the steps or around the building, couldn't we offer tutoring or homework help? TMA or Thurgood Marshall Academy has weightlifting for the kids in the morning, but I hope we can add even more options. I am a flutist. The arts is what helped me understand math. Those types of programming options are what can spark learning in students. It ignites their creativity. It gets them in their subjects. It makes them invest. It helps the learning stick, helps them see beyond just the right now, helps them think about the future and what they want out of life. So please protect the budget for schools, specialized schools programs and out of school times program, and make sure that there are enough partners who are trained to support additional programming for our young people. Second, we need more safety personnel around schools doing pickup and drop off. That includes MPD, but should also safe passage workers, school leadership. They all need to be working together and coordinated to communication is strong. Communication is strong, and our kids feel like they have a protective shield around them. They need to know and understand what is going on with young people to be able to respond and keep them safe. The police cannot do that on their own, but they do. But if they can be connected to the school systems, let that change be in a policy and practice follow. In closing, we must approach this work with urgency and targeted strategy and do it in the community, schools, and young people. We need combination of prevention, intervention, and legislation. The crime bill alone won't keep our kids safe on the way to and from school. Legislation is easy. Right? The question is about implementation. That is the hard work. We want you to implement. We can't watch our kids. We need to develop relationships with them. And it doesn't require more in the budget. Develop trust. That is the key word. If you fix at the schools, it will reverberate into the things outside of the school. We don't need a brand new budget. We need to keep building on the relationships and investments, and we already have to meet the goals. We can reimagine safety. Consider additional investments like youth only metro routes with safe passage workers, empty Wameta PD, stations on during school arrival dismissal times, more training for law enforcement, both MPD, both schools and school resources officers, better programming options for kids. We want the city to be successful. It's not just about football, basketball teams winning and bringing in revenue. We need to see the big picture. How all things that are an issue with our young people, we can help. You can make this successful. We need to make our students aren't only focusing on what they're doing now and what they want to do in the future. That the future is what matters. Our students being successful makes you successful and allows DC to thrive. It is a win-win for the next generation and every generation after. There isn't just about grandson. It's not just about my grandson. It's about all the children. And we can do this. We can do it together. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I welcome any questions.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both very much for being here today and for all of the work that you do throughout the year. I'm so sorry to hear about the incident with your grandson. It is just heartbreaking, and he shouldn't have to put up with that. Neither should any kid across DC. I want to ask just very practically, when we think about safe passage and expanding its efficacy, one of the things that we hear and that you all talked a little bit about is the coordination. It's not just somebody standing outside the school, but it's really making sure that our kids can get to and from school safely. What do you think that looks like in practice from the time the child is leaving the home to getting to school, and reverse? What does that actually look like when it comes to an effective wraparound support of a safe passage worker?
Yeah, I mean, and Annette, you should speak too, but I think one of the things we've heard when it's going really well is where the safe passage workers actually know the kids' names. Like, we've heard great experiences from some parents who are like, the safe passage worker makes jokes as my kids are traveling, and they like to actually pass them, right? And that makes them feel, I think it goes to what Annette talked about trust. But that means that they have to know who the kids are in the building, which means they need to have a relationship with the building. Where we've seen the programs done really well, they're actually doing work where they're at the morning meetings that the staff is having together. So that everybody's talking about, okay, what do we need to think about? Is there anybody who's got some stuff going on that we need to get, like, give them some extra additional support? I think that coordination really has to happen between the people that are on the ground. I think what we've done right now is, and what I give the Deputy Mayor for Public Service, Safety and Justice a lot of credit for, is that there's really good work being done when there is an incident, like something major that is happening. But I think where I want to push us is that the better work is done when you actually build those relationships ahead of time. So now, as Raymond said, it's easy to pick up the phone and text and have that conversation because you already did the work to build the relationship. And I think we're doing it a little bit backwards, and that oftentimes, because we have so many incidents, we're being reactive versus being proactive in what coordination looks like. And so a lot of times those workers don't have the strongest relationships. It's going to be a hard position anyways, because it's hourly, it's not all day, right? And so I think even when they feel like they are more attached to the building, they're probably more likely to be retained, to want to stay, to feel like they have relationships with students, that this is their community, they care. We know that when we look at other hourly wage positions. And so I think a lot of that has to do with, what does that consistent coordination look like? How do they have a relationship with the building? We even talk to school leaders where they're like, when it's raining, they can come inside after they're done for the day and like do their wrap up in the building, right? Those little things. We give them waters on days that it's hot. It feels like those things are really small, but they're not for workers who are standing outside all day and managing our students. And I think some of those little pieces where they feel like they are actually a part of the coordinated strategy then makes the students feel different, not just about the adults. It's actually about how the students wind up receiving all of that love, because that's really what every parent is asking for. As a parent myself, you just want your kid to feel loved. As soon as they leave your house with love, you want them to feel loved all the way as they journey to school and get in that building and feel love again. And we've got a gap right now. What we're hearing from a lot of kids is that they feel like they have it in the building. They don't feel like they have it in the journey too.
I'd like to add, reimagine this. Reimagine your child leaving school. They may get on the metro. Someone may do the yellow bus. They get to the school. You want, when your child get to that school, that safe passage person is there. They're greeting them. They're saying hello. You also know when you have certain communities where, as Mr. Whedon has testified, there's a lot going on where Thurgood Marshall is at. So now you want to connect that with MPD. Now you want MPD to step in and say, we're going to be here, park right in front of the school because they can. Safe passage person is there. MPD is right there. Child is coming to school. They all interconnected. Then reimagine this. Then you want to reimagine there's a metro center right around the corner. So now you want Meta to actually work with the school, work with MPD. Why would I say that? Because a lot of those children, when they come to that school, they're coming off that subway. So you want that connection. What I'm saying is we have the money. We have the resources. It's called utilization. We need to know how to utilize the dollars that we already have. It's not a question of whether you have a budget. The budget speaks to what you're thinking and what you value and what is important. And what we have it. What we have to do is reimagine how we want to use that budget. So that's the Safe Passage program, not just a name, but they're integral in the community. They're integral with MPD, and it takes some of the weight off the MPD in retrospect. It takes the weight off some of the Safe Passage. That is what that reimagine is for that child. And every child in the District of Columbia deserves to be able to come to that school, get off that bus, get dropped off by their parent, and that person is greeting them, and MPD is right there, and while Meta is doing their job, when all of those variables are working together intricately, there's no burden on each one of them. That's what I see as reimagine and utilization of your dollars.
Well, thank you very much.
You're
Thank you
welcome.
both for being here today.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too. All right, we are going to call our virtual witnesses, Catrice Fuller, Taisha Andrews, Jason Cromes, Caitlin Burgo, Michael Johnson, Themba Massimini, Natalia Otero, Skylar Armstrong, Joe Bishop Henchman, and Michaela Deming. Give you all a moment to join. Please accept your invitation to join as a panelist. And we are going to start with Catrice Fuller, Citywide Board Parent Leader, Parents Amplifying Voices in Education, or PAVE.
Sorry about that. Good afternoon now, I believe. Councilmember Pinto and members of the committee and the Deputy Mayor for Public Safety and Justice. My name is Catrice Fuller. I'm a native Washingtonian, current Ward 5 resident, and a citywide board member with PAVE. Additionally, I am the proud mom of 4 boys who attend Monument Academy Public Charter School and Minor Elementary. But I am uber proud to serve this community as the Chief of Family and Community Engagement at Monument Academy as well. So over the past 2 years at Monument, we unfortunately have lost several students and their guardians to gun violence. The more digging that we did do into those personal situations, so much of it we learned had a lot to do with students and families' safe passage to and from school, just navigating through different neighborhoods and different wards that may unfortunately had some adversity towards each other. Due to COVID, we did lose our school resource officers. Our school resource officers were overly instrumental to our programming. They even named our bearding dragons that we still have in the building. But with losing them, we also lost a lot of intel within the Kingsman Park and Rosedale community that we were used to getting, with so many LEAs being near each other. I do know that there's different sectors in safe passage, yet I don't necessarily see and feel all of its effects in our neighborhood. So all of us neighboring schools, we took it upon ourselves to make sure that we continuously convene, that we discuss neighborhood happenings. Local MPD officers that we see responding to a lot of things in the neighborhood, we have incorporated them as well as the churches nearby and things into these conversations so that we can adequately plan for our neighborhood and for our kids and for our families. That looks like us adjusting our school dismissal times, us supporting each other as far as like acting as crossing guards and all of those things in the streets and in the neighborhoods, us as collective schools and entities, walking students to Stadium Armory, walking students to Benning Road to get on the X2 and things of that nature so that we can mitigate any potential conflicts that may arise and keep our students safe and keep them wanting to come back and forth to school. So I say all of this to say, as leaders of public safety, we need you to assist us with the collaboration to ensure that safety of our children when they travel to or from school is paramount to all. Because of that, because of all of what I shared above, myself and other paid parents are asking you all to add more youth-only WMATA buses and pilot youth-only train cars, all stationed with trained safe passage workers, WMATA PD, MPD, who are more connected to schools, or school resource officers who are more connected to schools. Additionally, I would like to push MPD to be more involved in our communities and to become well-versed in interacting with youth, including interacting with students with disabilities. As a mom of a child who's on the autism spectrum, that is overly important to me. It is our collective responsibility to ensure our children are safe at all times, especially when doing something as trivial as going to school. We have done the work to make sure that we have schools that kids want to go to. Now we have to collectively do the work to make sure that they can get there. So I believe with the help of you all, and of course, you know, we are here to assist you, that we can make this a reality for all students across our city. Thank you for your time, and I'm available for any questions as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ms. Fuller. And I love the idea of the kids-only WMATA bus. Taisha Andrews, Citywide Board Parent Leader from Parents Amplifying Voices in Education, or PAVE.
Yes, good afternoon. Hello, Councilmember Pinto and DC Council staff. My name is Ty Andrews, and I'm a native Washingtonian and Ward 8 resident. I'm also a parent. My children attend Plummer Elementary and McKinley Tech High School. Thank you for being here today and holding this hearing. As a parent and resident of the District of Columbia, I have much experience helping my family navigate the various modes of transportation in the city. First, I have some essential data for those on this council and the Department for Hire Vehicles to know about parents experiencing getting their kids to and from school. In recent surveys, it was found that children living in wards 5, 7, and 8 are often travel over 2 miles to get to school. Some travel over 3 miles. Though 50% of all students in DC live in wards 7 and 8, they travel further than any other ward besides 5 to get to and from school each day. During their travels, our youth are being targeted and enduring or witnessing violence. This often increases with the distance to school, as many students travel across wards, even across the city, to get to and from school. We must do a better job at protecting our children because they are our future. As a parent, I am concerned about safely getting my children to school. Last year, my son was on his way home from Jefferson, where he attended school at the time, and was a victim of an incident. Other kids jumped my son at the Waterfront Metro Station. There was no trained adult, WMATA PD, or MPD around to help him. His peers were the only people present to intervene. When I filed a report with his school and MPD, nothing was done. The children who jumped my child were not held accountable. Our kids need to be safe traveling to and from school and get to school efficiently. Teenagers now have a much different experience getting to and from school than I did growing up. I didn't witness all of the violence that we see now on public transportation. Times have changed, and we as leaders of the city must create systems and put structures in place to help our kids, especially when they're doing something as simple as going to school or coming home. I'm not alone in these concerns. PAVE parent leaders have worked with schools, community organizations, and even agency staff to develop specific solutions to address this issue. I'm requesting an increase in the DC School Connect routes during school arrival and dismissal, prioritizing those with the greatest need. More routes will increase access, and those who can utilize it will have safer and more efficient commutes to school. I'm also asking WMATA to create a student-only Metro car with WMATA PD, safe passage workers, or MPD present to intervene if necessary. I also advise WMATA PD and safe passage workers to obtain the proper training for youth, including youth development and de-escalation training. We need more eyes on the ground during pickup and drop-off hours. This will help ensure that our young residents get to school and back home safely and efficiently. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much, Ms. Andrews. Jason Cromes, Parent Leader, Parents Amplifying Voices in Education, or PAVE.
Yes, hi. Thank you for having me here today. My name is Jason Cromes, and I am extremely concerned about student public safety at Thurgood Marshall Public Charter High School in Ward 8. My son Jaden is a ninth grade student at Thurgood Marshall and has already been the victim of 2 serious gun violence experiences this year. Miss Ivy referenced him earlier. That's her grandson, and I'm his father. It is simply unacceptable that he cannot attend school without life-threatening risk. It is my hope that my son's story and the stories of other parents will appropriately incentivize additional resources to ensure the ongoing gun violence emergency does not impact the education of our young Washingtonians. The first incident this school year happened when Jaden was robbed at gunpoint while waiting for transportation at Anacostia Metro Station. I understand the DC policy stipulates that students are to receive safe passage to and from school. If true, incidents like this cannot happen across the street from the school. There should be a strong presumption that students will be using the Anacostia Metro Station and therefore protection for these kids. Last month, my son again faced mortal danger when 3 non-student teens robbed, assaulted, and shot at him and his friend while waiting to enter school. The armed assailant may have shot my son or his friend if not for the gun jamming, allowing them to seek refuge in the school. It is only a matter of time before a student is not as lucky. In the wake of these traumatized incidents, my son has not felt safe going, attending, and leaving school. I appreciate the prompt and appropriate response from Thurgood Marshall's leadership, the local police, and Councilmember White's office, but this could have been prevented if the school received the proper resources, mainly an on-site student resource officer and any other resources that would ensure the safety of its students outside of the school. Parents need the city to address this aspect of DC's gun violence epidemic proactively. It is not enough to reactively ask the children to pick up their lives and soldier up once they are confronted with this violence. No child should have to experience this while attempting to simply get an education. A child's perceived sense of safety is a critical tenet in their physical and emotional development, therefore impacting their ability for academic success. This violence is not normal and should not be the new normal in our nation, let alone our nation's capital. I do understand that the District of Columbia is experiencing a crime epidemic, primarily by juveniles, and MPD has significant staffing shortages. Still, the city must protect these students. I understand that additional resources come with cost. However, these traumatic incidents also come with a cost to the victim. There are the fiscal costs the parents must bear to protect their children. There are emotional and psychological costs for children who do not feel safe. My worry is not just for my son, but also any student attending school in the city. Who benefits from the Safe Routes to School program if there aren't appropriate protections even across the street at the metro station? School should be a safe environment that allows students to get the most out of their education, but that is not the case if they don't feel safe. I respectfully request more protective resources for Thurgood Marshall Public Charter High School and other schools in the district's high-risk areas. Lacking these resources imperils the futures of its students. These students are our potential future leaders, and it is in our best interest to provide them with the proper resources so they can thrive in their educational environment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cromes. Next, we'll hear from Caitlin Burgo, parent leader, Parents Amplifying Voices in Education, or PAVE.
Hi, good afternoon, Councilmember Pinto and DC Council staff. I'm Caitlin Burgo. I'm a Ward 1 resident and PAVE PLE board member and a parent of a kindergartner at Bancroft Elementary School in Ward 1. I also live right down the street from the school. Thank you for taking your time out of your busy schedules to attend this hearing and for listening to all of the PAVE parents that are here today. I'm here to talk about my experience with safety, particularly the safety around schools and the need for many safety improvements across the district. My experience specifically relates to the traffic safety around Bancroft Elementary School and a success that we've had that I would like to see replicated where it's needed across the district for other students. As I said, I live right by Bancroft, and it's where my 5-year-old daughter attends. At Bancroft, we came together as parents and neighbors to successfully advocate to close the road directly in front of the school during drop-off and pickup times. So it's just closed for 2 hours a day, 1 hour in the morning and 1 hour in the afternoon. The road closure was really needed in this community because people would often drive by the school speeding while on their way to work, and traffic would get congested, making it nearly impossible for parents to get their children to school safely in time. It was a really harrowing experience trying to do drop off when cars were flying so close to a school that has, 3-year-olds through 5th graders. The road was so dangerous during arrival and dismissal that many parents and staff had witnessed incidents that were accidents and near miss accidents during pickup and drop off before we made this change. After a year of a huge push by the dedicated people here in our neighborhood and our school community, including parents and teachers, we finally got the road closed during drop off and pickup. In Ward 1 and at Bancroft, there are a lot of parents with knowledge of the system, financial ability, and time, which helped move this project along. The success was important, but I'd like to see it spread to other schools with parents who might not have the privilege to advocate for as long as we did to get something like this done. With that being said, students deserve to feel safe when they travel to and from school, and there are so many ways that the Deputy Mayor of Public Safety and Justice, the DC Council, and other city leaders can work together to make this happen. I'd like us to talk about some of the ways we can ensure schools get needed traffic safety improvements quickly, as well as improve safe transportation options, passage workers and MPD, as some of the other paid parents just talked about, need to collaborate to help get kids to school safely. WMATA can work to implement supervised student-only Metro cars, and we must improve safety around school entrances. And I suggest replicating what happened at Bancroft so that other schools, especially elementary schools around the city, can remove barriers to getting these things done. Things like closing the road in front of the school entrances so that that can be replicated when it's needed. All in all, I urge all of our city's leaders to work together to improve safe passage for the youth of DC. Thank you for your time and consideration, and I look forward to future collaboration. I'm available for any questions.
Thank you very much. Next, we'll hear from Michael Johnson, Policy Analyst, DC Fiscal Policy Institute.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Pinto. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Michael Johnson, and I am a policy analyst at the DC Fiscal Policy Institute. DCFPI is a nonprofit organization that shapes racially just tax, budget, and policy decisions. And today, my testimony focuses on the need for the district to provide timely record relief for people with criminal records and ensure public reporting of record relief progress. Recently, the council has made a lot of positive strides to provide record relief for DC residents, including passing the Second Chance Amendment Act of 2022. However, this committee and the council should ensure more timely record relief for DC residents. And in particular, the committee should work with the Deputy Mayor's office to amend the Second Chance Act to allow for waiting periods for record relief to begin on the date of a person's conviction rather than after their sentence completion, ensuring more urgent processing of automatic expungements for decriminalized offenses, and lastly, requiring the Deputy Mayor's office to conduct continuous reporting of record relief progress and the collateral consequences faced by people with criminal legal involvement. So currently, the Second Chance Act requires record relief waiting periods again after sentence completion, which can go far beyond the end of incarceration. For example, DC residents on parole are typically under supervision for a period of 5 to 22 years. These are years that people with records, primarily Black and Brown DC residents, will continue to be restricted from accessing certain housing, employment, and other opportunities. States such as Alabama, South Carolina, and others begin record relief waiting periods on the date of someone's conviction, and the committee and the council should amend the Second Chance Act to ensure that these waiting periods for record relief begin on the date of a person's conviction to provide more urgent relief for those eligible. The committee should also work to ensure that the courts automatically expunge decriminalized offense records as close to the original timeline of January 2025 as possible. As you know, the Secure DC Amendment currently under consideration by the council requires the courts to automatically expunge decriminalized offense records by October 2027. And although the revised 2027 deadline is a step in the right direction from the current 2029 deadline, this still makes people with decriminalized offense records wait up to 3 years before their records are cleared, which is longer than some other states provide record relief for people with misdemeanor conviction records. Additionally, courts in Missouri, California, New Jersey, and others have recently enacted comprehensive record relief legislation have experienced significant delays in processing record clearing. And to help improve public transparency and accountability, the committee should also work with the Deputy Mayor's team to publish quarterly or biannual reports on record relief progress as authorized under the Second Chance Act. And lastly, in 2020, the council passed the Removing Barriers to Occupational Licensing for Returning Citizens Amendment Act, which required the deputy mayor to complete a study of the barriers associated with criminal legal involvement. Now, more than 2 years after the January 2022 deadline, the deputy mayor's has yet to send the study, and the committee should work with the deputy mayor to complete this study in a timely manner, and also work with the deputy mayor to make this study publicly available. Thank you so much for the opportunity to testify, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Bemba Massimini, Regional Director of Safety for KIPP DC.
Chair Pinto and members of the Council Committee on the Judiciary and Public Safety, good afternoon. My name is Bemba Massimini, and I'm the Regional Director of Safety at KIPP DC. Spent my entire career within the DC public education system, finding ways to help students address trauma and resolve conflicts while simultaneously helping schools to create systems that prevent conflicts from negatively impacting their culture and community. With the help of the Metropolitan Police Department, schools can create a safe learning environment within the walls of the school. But we need help from the council and the Deputy Mayor for Public Safety and Justice to get students to and from school more safely and to improve communications across agencies. KIPP DC continues to invest in the safety and security of our school community, leading to a 40% reduction in violent incidents at one of our largest high schools this year. Some of these investments include 3 full-time safety and security leaders, 1 regional and 1 at each high school to coordinate safety services, violence interrupters around our secondary campuses to help students get to and from public safety education, public transportation safely, shuttle buses to and from metro stations at both of our high schools, and increasing school security at each of our campuses for more coverage than nearly every other school system in the District of Columbia. However, these investments will be most effective when paired with a robust and effective Safe Passage program at the highest need campuses. Currently, the Safe Passage program covers 8 priority areas, and only 4 of KIPP DC's 8 campuses are included. This program's website claims that the School Safety and Safe Passage Working Group will continue to evaluate the safety in each of the initial priority areas to determine if additional support in the area is necessary, and consider expanding the existing group of safe passage areas based on student safety concerns. However, we have no clarity on when that evaluation will occur, what criteria will be used to conduct that evaluation, or how we can advocate for a school community in need of support. In order to improve student safety, the Deputy Mayor for Public Safety and Justice should reassess safe passage priority zones using a transparent, equity-based criteria that includes the number of MPD and WMATA PD incidents near a school where the victim and or perpetrator were juveniles, the distance between the school and the nearest WMATA station, the number of high schools within a half mile of that particular school, and the percentage of the student population who commute more than 2 miles. Using that criteria, they can target limited resources to the schools most in need of support. They should also create a mechanism for schools not included in a safe passage zone, but in need of support to request special consideration. It's very important to us because this past Friday, we had a middle school student at our Benning campus who was not included in the safe passage zones, have a gun pulled on her after school. The Deputy Mayor for Public Safety and Justice should also determine if the program staffing and training model is adequate to cover the necessary routes to keep students safe. KIPP DC's College Preparatory High School currently receives 6 safe passage workers to cover the 0.8 of a mile between the school and the Noma Metro station. Since safe passage workers must be stationed in pairs, that allows them to supervise the front of the school building and just 2 other areas. Staffing should be determined based on the safety needs in the community and the distance to that metro station. The safe passage model is centered around trusted adults working for community-based organizations with a strong connection to the community who can serve as critical eyes and ears. We support this model, but we encourage the Deputy Mayor for Public Safety and Justice to review the training offered to ambassadors to ensure that they have the requisite conflict resolution and mediation techniques to engage students and community members and practice de-escalation. Finally, the Deputy Mayor for Public Safety and Justice should increase communication systems between safety agencies, safe passage personnel, and schools so that all can work together to keep students safe. Schools often know when fights occur on campus that could spill over into the after-school commute. Safe passage workers often know if there are incidents in the community that could cause tension on campus. And other safety agencies like MPD, WMATA PD, and the Deputy Mayor for Public Safety and Justice know about safety concerns in real time that can impact schools and the student commute. But unless there are systems to facilitate communication, we may continue to work in silos and not benefit fully from this potential partnership. For our 2 campuses in Ward 5, we partner with the Growing Up, the Safe Passage CBO, to also run our Violence Interrupter program. The Violence Interrupters work on our campuses during the day, building relationships with students and families. They serve as the needed bridge between the school leadership and their Safe Passage colleagues in the community. They also support our team with conflict resolution and mediation. This could be a citywide model to improve communication and program efficacy. However, the federal funding that we have been using for our violence interrupters is ending at this fiscal year. Like all schools, will have many difficult financial choices. Safe Passage is a critical part of our student safety infrastructure, and by identifying best priority zones, adequately staffing based on need, and creating a model that increases effective communication, conflict resolution, we can create a model that keeps even more students safe. Thank you very much, and I look forward to answering any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Massimini. Next, Natalia Otero, co-founder and executive director of DC Safe.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. I'm so sorry, I'm getting over a cold. I apologize for my voice. Thank you so much, Chairman Pinto and members of the committee. My name is Natalia Otero. I'm the co-founder and executive director of DC Safe. As a quick reminder, DC Safe is the only 24/7 crisis intervention agency for domestic violence in Washington, DC. We have a one-of-a-kind referral partnership with MPD, where officers are required by the city general order to connect survivors with DC Safe when on the scene of a domestic violence incident. This ensures the life-saving interventions are available quickly and easily for those in need. Our services are also accessible through other entry points, including hospital bays, community partner referrals, and the city's 2 walk-in domestic violence intake centers. Upon connecting with a client, our advocates offer tangible crisis response based on court-based advocacy and crisis shelter services. Additionally, in 2009, prompted by a particularly violent domestic violence murder, former OVS director Melissa Hook and the then city administrator approached DC Safe to assist in incorporating lethality assessments into the DC public safety net. These assessments are a national best practice in domestic violence homicide prevention. By identifying survivors at high risk for reassault or homicide and streamlining services across agencies and systems, we reduce the harm and increase survivors' chances of living through their situation. We revolutionized the idea and developed a mechanism that works significantly better than the original concept in terms of survivor engagement and services. I'm talking about the High Risk Domestic Violence Initiative, aka the HRDVI. It now includes 17 district and federal agencies and nonprofit organizations coming together to create critical response plans for survivors in real time. Regrettably, for the first time in 15 years leading this multidisciplinary task force, we lack the political support despite having built the HRDVI in partnership with the Deputy Mayor's office. We have witnessed the creation of important life-saving initiatives that unnecessarily replicate or complicate work already being done, with little to no input from the community and agency champions doing the work on the ground. We need to be given the necessary tools and political backing to provide the level of collaborative support that I know this city is capable of. In my opinion, most of the recent domestic violence homicides that we have seen have been a result of some sort of system failure. In one particular case, our client was killed by her ex-partner shortly after he was paroled based on compassionate release due to COVID policies. Maybe if this client was identified in the system as high risk, which we knew she was, the judge would have understood that informing her was crucial to her safety and ensured that she was notified prior to his release. Or maybe the defendant would not have been released to begin with due to the high level of risk that he posed to this victim. In another case, the lack of proactive information MPD had on hand from DC Superior Court when attempting to serve a protection order may have cost one of our clients her life? How many preventable homicides do we need to see before we take this seriously? We went from having 3 domestic violence homicides in an entire decade to 3 in just 1 year. Out of the approximately 2,000 high-risk survivors we meet with each year annually, around 800 of them want to engage in enhanced services provided by the HRDVI. We also maintain a list of 75 repeat offenders, yet we keep facing obstacles in sharing critical information necessary for the system to make informed decisions that protect survivors. We're not just dealing with inaction, we may be dealing with negligence here. I am here today to sound the alarm bell. Without a named ideological commitment from the city and more collaboration, we will continue to see negative impacts on survivors at high risk for homicide and ultimately more deaths in our community. We ask that the council and the deputy mayor for public safety take the time to learn more about the efforts of the HRDVI and commit to working together to create a coordinated response to the crisis that we are currently facing in the city. We need to codify the HRDVI as a homicide prevention program. We need the deputy mayor to advance an updated city administrator's order. The ongoing delays hamper critical interventions in the moments of crisis for survivors. The refusal to formally acknowledge a successful system of care puts survivors unnecessarily at risk and creates hurdles for the community-based organizations and city agencies working together on the ground to help them. These interventions desperately require proactive and coordinated information, encouraged and facilitated by the city administrator's order. If the city administrator's order proves untenable, we would be open to discussing legislative solutions. Thank you so much for your time today and attention, and I will pass it over to a member of our board who will be speaking. I do want to say before I go, though, that I think you hear the stress in my voice because I've been in this community now for 17 years, and every single time that we lose a survivor that we're actively hurting, that we're actively working with, it is extremely painful for us to see the families engaging in the aftermath of that. And it's extremely difficult for advocates. I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Sotero, and thank you for all of the important work that you do. I can only imagine how emotionally taxing it is, but so important for our survivors. Thank you. Skylar Armstrong, board member of DC Safe.
Thank you, Chairperson Pinto and esteemed members of the committee. My name is Skylar Armstrong, and I'm a board member at DC Safe. Since first becoming involved with the organization, I've been particularly struck by DC Safe's work to prevent domestic violent homicides through the HRDVI. It is clear that participating in and leading the HRDVI initiative is really at the foundation of DC Safe's entire mission. Natalia described the urgency of a political investment in this work, and I'm here today to bring your attention to the fiscal front. DC Safe plays a vital role in the city's public infrastructure. In many other cities, it's actually government entities that are responsible for providing the services that DC Safe so excellently provides here in the district. A nonprofit providing these services instead of the city results in a cost saving for the district, not only in that the city does not have to provide the direct services in this area, but also in that DC Safe is actively preventing crimes that have a high fiscal impact on the city and its residents. For example, we estimate that a single homicide in the district likely costs the city at least $2 million. To put this in perspective, DC Safe's entire operating budget is only $7.5 million annually, and we are achieving an incredible scale of impact in connection with public safety. Last year, we received over 42,000 incoming calls from the public safety cluster, provided critical intervention for over 12,000 domestic violence survivors, guided almost 4,000 clients through the court processes, supported over 1,000 clients in accessing crime victim compensation program, provided 712 nights of safe shelter to residents while helping other clients navigate the city's homeless services, and conducted 3,471 lethality assessments, identifying clients that are at risk for assault or homicide. What is more is that our service volume is only one facet of our ultimate impact on the public safety in the district. For example, this year, DC Safe trained 2,200 MPD officers, providing in-depth review of the intra-family offense statute, protection and anti-stalking orders, as well as review of revisions to MPD's own general order to streamline referrals to our crisis response line. Despite a distinct lack of fiscal support for this effort, we embraced the opportunity, which required DC Safe staff members to provide 3 days of in-person training every week from February to December, because we know the objective of training MPD officers to prevent domestic violence in the city is so critical. DC Safe does receive a significant financial investment from the city on an annual basis. This year, our local district grants made up 70% of our operating budget, the most significant sources being from OVSJG and DHS. While that percentage may seem high, I would like to reiterate again that many of our services would be the city's obligation and responsibility if not for DC Safe. The current level of funding we receive from the city does not provide adequate investment in the work we do leading the HRDVI. The city has taken steps to invest significantly in crime reduction, homicide prevention, and gun control in the past several years. So as a DC Safe board member, but also as a district resident, it's perplexing to me why the HRDVI has not been included as a part of this investment strategy, as it is clear that reducing domestic violence will make the city safer for all residents. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to our continued partnership to improve public safety.
Thank you so much, Ms. Armstrong. Joe Bishop Henchman, Commissioner from ANC 5F06.
Thank you, Chairperson Pinto and members of the committee. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Perfect, thank you. I'm grateful for the opportunity to submit this testimony for today's oversight hearing. As you just mentioned, I'm ANC for 5F06 in Eckington. I've seen a stabbing on my street. We've had a death from reckless driving. I visited an apartment showered with bullets. I've had a work colleague held up at gunpoint. A visiting friend had his car stolen, and DC is still insisting that he pay the thief's speeding ticket if I can get advice on that one. And I know also, more to the point, I know that I'm not special. This is the lived experience of so many in DC right now. ANC 5F has voted to support the Secure DC bill, and we have many other suggestions, and those resolutions are in the record, and we'd love to hear back from the deputy mayor on those. Credit where credit is due. A couple months ago, when I asked some pointed questions about public safety, the deputy mayor had a 30-minute discussion with me, where she promised by month the action that would happen on crime lab accreditation and talked about more use of focused deterrence tactics by the police. Those all came to be, and I appreciate the engagement and action. So I've come with some new questions for the deputy mayor. First, USAO prosecution rates are in the 40 to 50% range compared to other major cities where they're 75% or more. What does the deputy mayor think the root cause of that is? The unelected USAO does seem to respond to public pressure. For example, prosecutions for retail theft in Columbia Heights, the shopping area there, doubled from January to this month after some public attention and political pressure. What actions does the deputy mayor suggest we take to increase public pressure for more prosecution of arrestees? Second, in their answers, MPD described our warrant process as neither central nor electronic. The 4 types of warrants they wrote are tracked manually by each unit with no database, inputs also manual, you can't extract information, and processes vary by lieutenant. It sounds like a mess. Given that so many arrestees for horrific crimes turn out to already have had an outstanding warrant, what is the deputy mayor doing to get us a modern, proactive warrant database system? Third, on January 31st, our 5th District commander conducted a sting where he placed a delivery package on a porch and waited. Someone came along that afternoon and stole the packages, and the MPD arrested him for theft. As of today, USAO has not charged this person. Why? Did MPD do something wrong in the arrest? And if so, has that been communicated to MPD? Is it stuck in a long line at the evidence lab? And if so, how long will the backlog in the evidence lab take to clear? I've heard a rumor that USAO has a policy not to prosecute thefts where there's no violence. Is this true? And if it is true, is it the right policy? And if not, how do we change it? And then also, we typically have a surge in crime in the summer. So, we are seeing a reduced amount of crime right now. Is it seasonal or is it going to last? And what actions is the deputy mayor taking to surge our response to crime in the summer as well? Finally, I wanted to follow up on something I'd asked before and haven't been able to track down, which is what do we do with seized guns that are no longer required for evidence? When I previously asked this question, I was referred to MPD, who explained that they keep weapons needed for evidence, but couldn't say what happens after this. I certainly hope we're not auctioning them off for sales and gun shows in Virginia, because that would be silly. And I especially ask because we have an option to send these weapons to a good use halfway around the world. The government of Ukraine has a program with police departments in Miami and other cities in the United States to receive donated weapons seized in US cities to arm their civilian militias in areas under Russian threat. They take all available weapons of all kinds and have made appropriate export arrangements with the US Department of State. Is there reasons that DC cannot participate in this program? I've submitted a statement with all of this information for the record, along with the various PNP 5F resolutions. Thank you to the committee for its actions in the past year on public safety, and I look forward to further responses. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Next and last on this panel, Michaela Deming, Policy Director of DC Coalition Against Domestic Violence.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Pinto, members of the committee and staff. My name is Michaela Deming, and I'm the Policy Director for the DC Coalition Against Domestic Violence. DCCADV is a federally recognized statewide coalition of domestic violence service providers here in the district, and we have 18 member programs. As a district, we have spent a considerable amount of time over the past year discussing community violence and what measures we might be able to enact to ensure safer communities. One piece that has been notably missing is domestic violence prevention and intervention as being key to addressing community violence. Recently, OVSJG was before this committee talking about the prioritization of intervention over primary prevention of domestic violence for their grant awards. Interestingly, they also oversee truancy prevention. And in that case, there's a specific priority for primary prevention, but domestic and intimate partner violence is not being addressed as part of those efforts. Primary prevention of domestic violence continues to be overlooked and woefully underfunded in the district. A community safety vision or plan clearly acknowledging the intersections of currently siloed issues and identifying the proactive prevention strategies and holistic responses to incidents creates safer communities. Instead, there seems to be a cycle of short-term budget commitments and reactive bills that do not invest in long-term and systemic change. We as a district are siloing community issues in ways that prevent successful outcomes. We cannot separate truancy, gun violence, homelessness, substance use, maternal mortality, or a host of other issues from domestic violence. Children experiencing domestic violence in the home or who are victims of dating violence are more likely to be truant. People who have perpetrated domestic violence with a firearm are more likely to use those firearms in other contexts. The trauma that comes from domestic violence is a leading cause of homelessness for single women and families in the district. And women in the US are more likely to be murdered during pregnancy or soon after childbirth than to die from the 3 leading obstetric causes of maternal mortality. And Black women are specifically at a substantially higher risk of being killed during this time. Only a vision or cohesive plan that reaches across the divisions of agencies, committees, funding sources, and strategic plans will be able to address root causes, develop and implement prevention strategies, and respond to incidents in ways that encompass meeting the needs of survivors, as well as those who do harm, so the community is safer now and into the future. Last year, we spoke about the promising training that we had begun with the violence interrupters to cross-train credible messengers and other VI positions that they would be better able to recognize relationships where domestic violence was occurring and be able to provide resources. This is funded by a small federal grant and includes several additional foundational and advanced trainings. Despite having the funding to develop and provide the training, we have been unable to get those additional training sessions scheduled with either the deputy mayor or the OAG. Violence interrupter models in other cities have incorporated domestic advocates in their process with promising success. We are disappointed to see that the VI program leaders here have not prioritized training for those VIs and recognition of domestic violence and how to link with resources. In my written testimony, there is a lot more data connecting all of those other pieces of community safety, so I will only highlight a few here. During a public safety summit last year, then Chief Conti specifically mentioned that a large majority of the cases of assault with dangerous weapons cases in DC are domestic violence incidents. There have been a number of other connecting statements made by the mayor's administration. I also wanted to point out that among youth who dated in the past year, 70% are reporting experiencing dating violence, and 68% of youth reported experiencing school interference from a dating partner. That number jumps to 88% who reported a history with teen dating violence. So school interference could be things like truancy and missing school altogether for long periods, but it could also be things like impacting their education. We do have an Expect Respect curriculum that we are also having difficulty getting implemented into more schools here in the district, despite the requirements of the School Safety Act. And so we would also appreciate that a widely coordinated effort would also include prevention efforts for district's youth within school. School needs to be safe inside as well as outside. We believe that domestic and intimate partner violence, as well as community violence rooted in that gender-based violence, are preventable. We continue to seek sustainable resources to support programming, policy initiatives, and community awareness about prevention. Through proactive partnership with the Deputy Mayor's Office and investment in primary prevention efforts, we will be able to address the rise in youth and family violence in the district. We are committed to being DC's leader in efforts to stop violence before it starts, and we hope that district leaders across government agencies will join us. Thank you, Chairperson Pinto, for the opportunity to testify, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Ms. Deming. We're also going to add one more panelist to this panel who is joining us in person, Dwayne Falwell, President and CEO of Together We Rise Community Model, LLC. Mr. Falwell, sit wherever you're comfortable. Make sure to turn on your mic so that it's red, and please go ahead whenever you're ready.
Good evening, Councilman Pinto, Dwayne Falwell, CEO and President of Together We Rise, Volunteer Interruption Group under the Neighborhood Safety Engagement Initiative. I've been in this initiative since 2018 when it was rolled out, and I'm just kind of here to give some updates on where we are with the initiative and from a violence interruption standpoint. When we started off in 2018, as I testified before, it was hadn't been in the city since, I guess, Peaceaholics, and we had a 8-year gap in this type of work. Since that time, the model's been up and down and revised a few times. And I want to say under the Deputy Mayor Pierre and Jasmine Benai from the Mayor's Office, we have gained a lot of ground and stability with the work that we do now. We've been meeting for several months in reference to how to work in conjunction and not in silos. We work the silos, I guess, for most of this initiative. What I will say is that over the last, I guess, year, we've were able to dissect mistakes that we made early on and try to get some continuity with the work that we do in the city. And I think from that continuity, we're starting to see some wins and some outcomes that's favorable to the city. The investments that the mayor have made, the council, and everybody is involved in investment should be very proud of some of the work that we've done. I know we've got a lot of negative feedback from the community because they don't see the stuff that we do firsthand. But I will say that in the last 6 months, the morale, also the direction that we're going in is very, very clear. I know that from the Office of Neighborhood Safety Engagement, the violent groups that are contracted in this work have become as one, and we have been able to identify the individuals that we are targeting, which are the most at risk to be shooters or be shot in those communities that we serve. One of the things that we have ran across is that some of the communities that we don't serve is a problem, and we have identified how to get in those communities as well, so we can bring some continuity with the neighborhoods that's at odds with one another. All I ask for the council is that you continue to support the work that we do and give us the time to finish doing the work we're doing, because I think we have some favorable outcomes that are headed this way, and I think the city will be kind of proud of the work that we're doing as we continue to move forward. That's all I have at this time.
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Falwell. Thank you for joining us today. Yes. We may have a question for you in a moment.
Okay.
But I want to turn to you, Ms. Otero, and as we think about the performance of the Deputy Mayor's Office over the course of the last year, you talked about some of the identification of high-risk individuals who may be most likely to engage in domestic violence. And have you coordinated with the deputy mayor's office on that type of identification so that we can most effectively follow up with those individuals and try to prevent the violence before it occurs?
I have actually prior to her stepping into her role, we were in conversation with the office around looking at the current city administrator's order that governs the high-risk domestic violence initiative. And we spent the better part of probably a year and a half with their general counsel, going back and forth around the protocol that should be in place in order for us to incorporate all the lessons learned over the last 15 years that we've been collaborating. That took about a year and a half. And then when Director Apia came into her role, I met with her early on to try and engage her in a conversation. She was very amenable, and we had kind of a big hill to climb in terms of getting her up to speed to what we've been doing over the last decade in this field. And she seemed amenable, but I honestly never heard back. The structural pieces of this that are required in order for this project to have big impact is, I think, still kind of lingering in political land. And it isn't, I don't know why we are not hearing the engagement and making those connections, because I know that there's a lot of concern around gun violence. And I think part of what Michaela was saying is that these are all the same population and we all have to work together. These aren't siloed people.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And I think that's exactly right. When we have the information, we need to make sure that there is appropriate follow-up and not just kind of duplication of identification. So thank you for that. Mr. Massimini, I appreciated your comments on improving our safe passage program and wanted to see if you had any examples of schools in the district where you think this is done particularly well in supporting our young people and making sure that they can get to and from school most safely. Mr. Massimini, are you still here? All right. I'll turn to you, Mr. Fall. You talked about morale improving in recent months. Can you expand on that a little bit? What do you think that is due to?
I think the morale improvement has been just the engagement that we've been having lately with the deputy mayor, Apia, and also Lindsay Benai, where we be able to get a direct playbook on what's next, right? And how we approach the work. Meaning that I think before each organization had their own way they approach the work. I think now we approach it as one. And so when we look at it as one, we're able to have a direct blueprint on what to do. You know, protocol SOPs are in place now that were initially in place for each individual organization, how we dealt with those communities. And I think that now that we are meeting on the regular as a whole, right, instead of meeting in groups, individual groups, I'm sorry, we meet as a whole. We've been meeting here in this building as well, and in different in areas in our organizations. We're meeting with the CBOs in the community. We're meeting with the community-based organizations, also with the stakeholders in the community to find out exactly what those needs are, who those individuals that we are targeting. We talk about those at risk use. So when we don't waste any energy on stuff that doesn't pertain to the work that we're doing, right? Because I think sometimes the community look at us as violent brothers, but they look at us as police officers. We're not police, or we don't do police work. We do exactly work that we deal with those. It's targeted just for those guys that we know to be very at risk, right? And so sometimes we get calls saying that some guys are standing on the front of the building. We want them to move. That's not our job per se. If those guys are the risk guys that we're dealing with, then we can have a conversation. So I think that the morale's come up because now the volunteers that work with us are now targeting on the work that we set a hand for us to do. So I think that's where the morale comes up. And we understand that we don't want to wear the whole weight of the city on us for everything that happens. If a shooting happens between just happening on a random, it shouldn't be charged to us every single time, because that's not what we have. So if the individual on the street come out or say about a store and they get into an argument because a guy stepped on his shoe or bumped him, they don't like each other, and the guy gets shot, that shouldn't always come on the violent brother, because that's something that we couldn't have predicted. But if it's guys that we're working with so forth in the community, we know that they had odds with another community or a situation that we know that's going on, then we are able to identify those individuals and find those solutions to resolve those problems. So that's where morale comes in with the work that we're doing.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you very
Right.
much for that. And I wanted to ask you, Ms. Fuller, if you're still here. Ms. Fuller.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi. Thank you so much for sharing your story and some of your great suggestions. I wanted to ask you what you thought best practice would look like in training MPD on interacting particularly with kids with special needs or disabilities.
I would say number one to start. So something we do here with our staff, and when we had our school resource officers, we had a session where we broke down the different disability classifications, diagnoses, and codes, and just what those behaviors, how they manifest, how the behaviors manifest. So we could talk about like ADHD or oppositional defiance disorder, or for instance, like my eldest son, a student with autism, and what that may look like when interacting with some. We even had some of our students speak to the MPD officers and our staff to kind of express how some of their behaviors and anxiety and things manifest. So for instance, my son was one who spoke to the officers in regards to I know sometimes in these type of situations, you may be looking for compliance, direct eyesight and things of that nature is not something that I'm used to. And when I'm nervous, I flap, I move, I do these things. So just letting them know how behaviors manifest and what that can look like, and just giving them some proper strategies on how to deal with those behaviors. For instance, sometimes ignoring certain behaviors is the best thing. Sometimes giving processing time or giving students the ability to exert some of that kinesthetic energy. Sometimes just thinking of things I witnessed where there may be a police officer who wants to stop someone and wants them to talk. Sometimes when these students with disabilities are anxious, the number one thing they need to do is move. We taught them some of our dialectical behavior therapy skills, one of the main ones being a tip skill. So when you have an escalated student, what you want to do is break down that acronym, change the temperature, either give them some fresh air, give them some cold, give them some hot, whatever the opposite is, intense movement and exercising. So just really teaching these practices that are in our school internally, but also just universally when it comes to special education students and what that looks like. Just breaking that down and giving them some crisis intervention skills.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for asking.
I want to thank all of our public witnesses who joined us today. That concludes our public witness testimony. The time is now 2:05 p.m. We are going to recess this hearing until 2:30 p.m. when we will pick up again with the Deputy Mayor for Public Safety and Justice, Deputy Mayor Lindsay Appiah. With that, the time is now 2:05 p.m. and we are recessed.